The morning Lena Crowe's life ended, she was thinking about bread. Not the fine wheat loaves served in the Hale Inn's dining hall. Those went to paying guests, travelers with clean hands and full purses. She was thinking about the dense rye brick she'd managed to hide in her apron 2 days ago, eating it in careful nibbles when no one was looking. The last piece sat in her pocket now, hard as a rock and just as precious. Her stomach had stopped growling years ago. It had given up, same as the rest of her. The kitchen was already sweltering, though dawn had barely broken. Steam rose from 3 massive pots, turning the air thick and wet. Lena moved between the cutting board and the stove with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned that hesitation earned backhand slaps. Potatoes. Onions. The gristly bits of meat that Marcus Hale deemed unfit for his guests, but plenty good for his workers. She was reaching for the iron skillet when Sarah, young, quick-fingered Sarah who'd arrived last month, stumbled with a tray. The sound of shattering porcelain cut through the kitchen noise like a gunshot. Everything stopped. Lena's hand froze halfway to the skillet. Across the room, old Thomas hunched lower over his washing basin. Sarah stood perfectly still, staring down at the destroyed serving plate, her face draining of color. The kitchen door slammed open. Marcus Hale filled the doorway, and Lena felt her bladder try to release. She clenched, holding it, keeping her eyes down. Survival rule number 1, never look directly at Marcus when he was angry. Survival rule number 2, Marcus was always angry. Who? His voice was quiet. That was worse than shouting. Who broke my mother's china? Sarah opened her mouth. Lena saw it happening as if time had slowed. The girl was going to confess, going to take responsibility, and Marcus was going to beat her so badly she'd never work again, if she survived it at all. It was me. The words left Lena's mouth before her brain caught up. I bumped the table. Sarah was just... She didn't get to finish. Marcus crossed the kitchen in 3 strides. His fist caught her in the side of the head, and the world tilted sideways. Lena's hip cracked against the cutting board as she went down. She tried to curl into a ball, but his boot found her ribs. Clumsy, stupid, worthless piece of... Another kick. Something cracked. Pain bloomed across her chest like fire. Do you know? Kick. What that plate... Kick. Was worth? Lena stopped trying to protect herself. She just lay there, tasting blood, watching Thomas's boots shuffle backward through her blurring vision. No one would help. No one ever helped. That was survival rule number 3. More than you. Marcus grabbed a fistful of her hair, yanking her head back. More than you'll ever be worth, you fat, useless... She didn't hear the rest. There was just pain and the copper taste of blood, and the knowledge that this time might be the time he didn't stop. When he finally let go, Lena collapsed face first onto the floor. She could hear him breathing hard above her, could smell the coffee on his breath mixed with something sharper. Whiskey, probably. It was barely past dawn, and he already stank of it. Get her out of my kitchen. His voice had gone flat. She's done. Lena tried to push herself up, but her arms wouldn't cooperate. Someone, Thomas maybe, grabbed her under the armpits and dragged her out the back door. The cold mountain air hit her like another fist. She sprawled in the mud and dirty snow, each breath a sharp agony in her chest. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard voices. No use to me like this. Know someone who might... Rourke pays for workers, doesn't he? Lena's eyes managed to focus. Marcus stood in the doorway, wiping blood off his knuckles with a kitchen rag. Beside him was a man she didn't recognize, thin, weathered, with the look of someone who spent his life on horseback. 50 silver, the stranger said, looking down at her like she was an injured horse he was considering putting down. That's what Silas offers for labor. Any kind. No questions. Marcus snorted. She can barely stand. Rourke don't care about that. He's got his own reasons for taking in strays. The stranger spat into the snow. Word is he's some kind of doctor, or was before he killed that merchant's daughter up north. Now he just hides in the mountains and pays good money for anyone desperate enough to make the climb. Lena's mind was struggling to work through the pain. Silas Rourke. She'd heard that name whispered in the workers' quarters late at night, heard the stories about the hermit who lived above the snow line, about the people who went up his mountain and never came back down. She's too fat to make the climb, Marcus said. Then she'll die trying, and it won't be your problem. The stranger pulled out a small leather purse, counted out silver coins. 50, as agreed. The money changed hands. Lena watched it happen through a haze of pain and disbelief. She'd just been sold. Like a pig. Like a piece of furniture. 50 pieces of silver and she wasn't Marcus Hale's problem anymore. Can you walk? The stranger nudged her boot with his. Lena tried. She got her hands under her, pushed up, made it to her knees before her ribs screamed and she collapsed again. Guess that's a no. The stranger sighed, then turned and whistled. A younger man appeared leading a mule. Get her on the pack saddle. We've got a 3-hour ride to the trailhead. Being lifted onto the mule was a special kind of agony. Lena bit through her lip to keep from screaming, tasted fresh blood. They tied her in place like cargo, her legs dangling, her broken ribs grinding with every step the animal took. As they led her away from the Hale Inn, away from 6 years of brutality masquerading as employment, Lena looked back once. Sarah stood in the kitchen doorway, one hand pressed to her mouth. Their eyes met for a second. Then the girl turned away. No one waved goodbye. No one called out. Lena Crowe simply disappeared from the inn, and the world moved on without her. The ride to the trailhead was endless. Every jolt sent fresh waves of pain through her chest. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her mind refusing to settle on anything except the cold and the hurt, and the knowledge that she was being delivered to a killer. Silas Rourke. The name repeated in her head like a funeral bell. They said he'd been a doctor once, one of the best. They said he could set bones that other healers would have amputated, could draw out infections that should have been death sentences. They said he'd saved dozens of lives. They also said he'd killed a merchant's teenage daughter during a routine treatment. Poison, some claimed. A deliberate overdose of medicine. The merchant had called for Rourke's head, but the doctor had fled into the mountains before justice could be served. Now he lived like a ghost above the snow line, in a cabin no one could reach without a guide. And he paid good money for workers. Any kind. No questions asked. No one ever came back to spend that money. Lena had always figured it was a story to scare people, a cautionary tale about what happened when you ran afoul of the powerful. But as the mule carried her higher into the foothills, as the temperature dropped and the wind picked up, she began to understand that the story was real, and she was riding straight into it. This is as far as we go. The stranger's voice cut through her painful daze. Trails marked with red cloth tied to the trees. Follow it up. Cabins at the top. They were untying her before she could process the words. Her body slid off the mule and hit frozen ground, and this time she did scream. It came out as more of a wheeze. Her ribs wouldn't let her draw enough breath for a proper scream. Food's in the pack. Water too. The stranger dropped a canvas bag beside her. If you make it to the cabin by nightfall, Rourke might let you in. If you don't, he shrugged. Freezing's supposed to be peaceful. Once you stop shivering, Lena managed to roll onto her side, managed to look up at him. Why? Why what? Why does he want people? The stranger exchanged a look with his companion. Hell if I know. Some say he experiments on them. Some say he's building an army of frozen corpses up there. Some say he's just crazy and lonely. He swung back up onto his horse. Doesn't much matter to you now, does it? You're his problem. They rode away without looking back. Lena lay in the snow for a long time, listening to the wind and the distant caw of ravens. Her entire body was one massive bruise wrapped around broken bones. The climb ahead was impossible. She'd die on this mountain. Maybe that was the point. Maybe Marcus had known exactly what he was doing when he took that 50 silver. Maybe this was just murder with extra steps. The smart thing would be to stay right here. Let the cold take her. It would hurt less than climbing, less than whatever waited at the top. But Lena Crowe had spent 6 years being smart, 6 years keeping her head down, taking her beatings, surviving. And where had it gotten her? Broken and discarded in the snow, sold for the price of a decent pair of boots. If she was going to die anyway, she might as well die moving forward. She got her hands under her, bit down on a scream, and pushed herself to her knees. The world swayed. Her ribs felt like broken glass grinding together inside her chest. She grabbed the canvas pack, used it to pull herself upright, and stood there swaying in the wind. The trail was barely visible, just a thin line of disturbed snow winding up through the trees. Red cloth marked the way, tied to branches every 100 feet or so. The mountain loomed above, white and indifferent. Lena took one step, then another, then another. She fell twice in the first 10 minutes. The second time, she lay face down in the snow and seriously considered staying there, just closing her eyes, letting go. But something in her, some stubborn, stupid spark that hadn't been beaten out yet, refused. She got up. The climb became a meditation on pain. Nothing existed except the next red marker, the next 20 feet of trail, the next breath that felt like knives in her chest. Time stopped meaning anything. The sun moved across the sky, but Lena didn't notice. She just climbed. Somewhere around what might have been noon, she opened the pack and found hard bread, dried meat, and a water skin. She ate mechanically, forcing food past the swelling in her jaw, washing it down with water so cold it made her teeth ache. The food helped. A little. She kept climbing. The trees began to thin as she gained altitude. The wind picked up, cutting through her thin work dress like it wasn't there. Her fingers were going numb. Her feet were worse. She couldn't feel her toes anymore, and she was distantly aware that this was very bad, that frostbite was setting in, but there was nothing she could do except keep moving. The sun was touching the western peaks when she saw it. A cabin, small, solid, built from dark timber that looked like it had been there forever. Smoke rose from a stone chimney. Light glowed in one window. Actual glass, not oiled paper. The trail led straight to a heavy wooden door. Lena stood at the edge of the clearing, swaying on her feet, staring at that door. This was it, the moment when she found out if the stories were true. She thought about turning around. She thought about running, but her body had nothing left. She'd used everything just getting here. Forward was the only direction available. She stumbled across the clearing, her feet barely lifting, leaving a wandering trail in the fresh snow. When she reached the door, she raised one numb hand and knocked. Nothing. She knocked again, harder. Pain shot up her arm, still nothing. "Please!" Her voice came out as a croak. "Please, I'm—" The door opened. Lena's words died. The man who stood in the doorway was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair going gray at the temples. He wore simple wool clothing, clean but worn. His face was weathered, lined with years and something that looked like old pain. His eyes were gray, the color of winter storms. Those eyes looked her up and down, taking in the bruises, the swelling, the way she was barely standing. "You're hurt." His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. Lena swayed, the world tilted. "I'm supposed to—" Marcus said, "Inside." He reached out, and Lena flinched hard, but he didn't hit her. He just steadied her with one hand under her elbow, guiding her through the doorway. Carefully, that's it. The warmth hit her like a wall. Lena's legs gave out. Silas Rourke caught her before she hit the floor, lowering her carefully onto a bench near the fire. "Easy, you're safe now." Safe. The word didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. Lena sat there shivering, not from cold anymore, but from the sudden absence of it, while Silas moved around the cabin with quiet efficiency. The interior was nothing like she'd expected. Clean, organized, well lit by oil lamps and the fire. Shelves lined one wall, packed with books and jars of dried herbs. A large wooden table dominated the center of the room, its surface scrubbed clean. In one corner, a bed with actual blankets. In another, a small kitchen area. It looked like a home, a real home. Silas returned with a cup of something hot. "Drink this." Slowly. Lena took the cup with shaking hands, sipped. Broth, rich and salty, with herbs she couldn't name. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted. "Your ribs are broken." Silas was examining her from a careful distance, not touching yet. "Probably 2, maybe 3. Your jaw's badly bruised, but not fractured. Frostbite on your toes. We'll need to warm them gradually. That ankle's sprained." He paused. "What's your name?" "Lena. Lena Crowe." "Lena." He nodded. "I'm going to need to touch you to set those ribs properly. I'll be as gentle as I can, but it's going to hurt. Do you understand?" She stared at him. You're going to help me?" Something flickered across his face. "That's what I do." "But Marcus said, people said—" Lena couldn't get the words out. "They said you kill people, that you're dangerous." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled up a stool and sat down, putting himself at eye level with her. "What else did they say?" That you were a doctor. That you killed a merchant's daughter. That people come up here and never go back. The first part is true. I was a doctor. His voice was calm, measured. The second part is complicated. The third part is true, but not the way you think. Lena waited, holding the warm cup, not understanding. Silas rubbed his face with one hand. The people who come up here are like you, Lena. Broken, discarded, sold for silver to get them out of someone else's way. His eyes met hers. I pay for them. I heal them. And when they're strong enough, I help them leave. Not back down to the valley. That would just get them killed or enslaved again. But north, to the free territories. Places where what they used to be doesn't matter. Why? Because someone should. He said it simply, like it was obvious. And because I can. Lena's mind was reeling. But the stories are useful. Silas stood, moving to one of his shelves. If people think I'm a killer, they stay away. If they think this mountain is cursed, they don't come looking for the people I help escape. Fear keeps this place safe. He returned with bandages and a small bottle. The merchant's daughter's story is true, by the way. I did give her medicine that killed her. Lena tensed. She was terminal bone cancer spreading through her whole body, in agony every moment. Her father was a powerful man who refused to let her die, kept demanding I save her, do something, anything. So I did the only thing I could. He set the supplies on the table. I gave her peace. And then I ran before her father could have me hanged for mercy. The cabin was very quiet except for the crackling fire. I'm going to help you now, Silas said. I'm going to set your ribs, treat your frostbite, and let you heal. When spring comes and the pass is open, I'll give you supplies and directions north. You'll have a choice then. Go to the free territories and start over, or go back down to the valley. He paused. Most people choose north, but it's always a choice. Do you understand? Lena nodded slowly. Her hands were still shaking around the cup. Good. Now, let's take care of those ribs. He moved closer, his hands careful and professional. This is going to hurt. You can scream if you need to. No one's going to hit you for it up here. The next hour was agony. Silas worked with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times, but broken ribs were broken ribs. He had to feel along each one, checking for fragments, making sure nothing was displaced. Every touch sent lightning bolts of pain through Lena's chest. She bit down on a leather strap he gave her and tried not to pass out. 2 clean breaks, he said finally, wrapping her torso in tight bandages. You're lucky. Could have been worse. Lucky. Lena almost laughed. He treated her frostbite next, warming her feet gradually in cool water while explaining the danger of warming them too fast. Her toes screamed as feeling returned, a burning, stabbing pain that made her gasp. That's good, Silas said. Pain means they're still alive. We'll watch them closely, but I think we caught it in time. By the time he finished, full dark had fallen outside. Lena sat on the bench, bandaged and exhausted, watching him move around the cabin preparing a simple meal. Potatoes, onions, actual meat, not scraps. You should eat, he said, setting a plate in front of her. Then sleep. Your body needs rest to heal. Lena looked at the food, at the cabin, at this man who was supposed to be a monster, but was instead carefully cutting potatoes into small pieces so she wouldn't have to chew much with her bruised jaw. Why? She asked again. Silas looked up. Why what? Why do all this? You could just not. You could take the silver and let people die on the mountain. No one would know. He was quiet for a moment, his knife pausing over a potato. When I was young, I thought medicine was about saving lives. Simple as that. You learned the techniques, you applied them, people lived. He resumed cutting. Then I learned that sometimes the technique kills people. Sometimes the medicine poisons them. Sometimes you do everything right and they die anyway. Lena waited. After the merchant's daughter, I realized something. Silas set down the knife. Medicine isn't about saving lives. It's about reducing suffering. Sometimes that means healing. Sometimes it means giving someone peace at the end. And sometimes, he gestured around the cabin, it means giving people a second chance at living. He slid the plate closer to her. Eat. We'll talk more tomorrow. Lena ate. The food was simple, but prepared with care, seasoned with herbs that made it actually taste like something. She cleaned the plate without meaning to, her body crying out for nutrition after years of near-starvation rations. Silas watched her finish, then showed her to the bed in the corner. "You take this. I've got a sleeping roll." "I can't." "You're injured. You get the bed. We're not arguing about this." Too tired to fight, Lena let him help her to the bed. The blankets were heavy and warm, the mattress stuffed with something soft. Pine needles, maybe, or dried grass. After 6 years of sleeping on a straw pallet on a kitchen floor, it felt like luxury beyond measure. She was asleep before Silas finished banking the fire. Lena woke to sunlight on her face and the smell of frying bacon. For a confused moment, she thought she was back at the inn, that she'd overslept and Marcus was going to... Then memory crashed back. The beating, the sail, the climb. Silas. She sat up carefully, her ribs protesting but not screaming. Across the cabin, Silas was cooking at the small stove, his back to her. "Morning," he said without turning around. "How do you feel?" "Like I got kicked by a horse." "That's about right." He brought over a plate. Eggs, bacon, actual buttered bread. "Eat. Then we'll check your bandages." The morning passed in a strange, suspended peace. Silas unwrapped her ribs, examined them with gentle hands, rewrapped them. He checked her toes, satisfied that the frostbite was minor. He gave her a salve for the bruises on her face. Through it all, he talked, not about anything important, just casual observations about the weather, the animals he'd seen that morning, the herbs growing in pots on the windowsill. Easy words that didn't require much response. Lena listened and watched and tried to reconcile this quiet, careful man with the monster from the stories. "Can I ask you something?" she said when he finished rewrapping her ribs. "Of course." "How many people have you helped? Up here?" Silas was quiet for a moment, coiling the leftover bandage. 43, not counting you. 43 people. Give or take. Some years I get 5 or 6. Some years none. Last year I had 9. He set the bandage aside. Spring is usually when they come. Innkeepers and merchants want to clear out their problems before the summer travel season starts. And they all made it? To the free territories? Most of them. Something shadowed his face. "I lost 2. One to infection before I could treat it. He'd been beaten so badly there was nothing I could do. Another chose to go back down, thought he could make it work. They found him dead in a ditch 3 months later." Lena absorbed this. "And no one's ever come looking? No one's ever found out?" "Oh, people know." Silas moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered peaks. "The local marshal knows. Hell, half the town knows. But as long as I stay up here and don't make trouble, they pretend I don't exist. Easier that way." "Why?" He glanced back at her. "Because deep down, they're glad someone's doing it. Someone's taking in the people they'd rather not think about. The broken ones. The inconvenient ones. The ones who got in the way, or didn't know their place, or just had bad luck." His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "It lets them sleep at night. They can tell themselves they're good people because they're not the ones beating slaves to death. They just look the other way while someone else does it." The truth of it settled over Lena like cold water. "That's why you let the stories spread. About you being dangerous. People need their monsters." Silas turned from the window. "Better they're afraid of me than curious about what I'm actually doing." The days began to settle into a rhythm. Mornings, Silas would check her injuries, rewrap what needed rewrapping, apply salves and tinctures. Then he'd make breakfast, always more food than Lena had seen in months. Eggs, bacon, fresh bread he baked himself, porridge with honey, and dried berries. "You're trying to fatten me up," she said on the 3rd day, looking at her loaded plate. "You're underweight, severely." Silas didn't look up from his own meal. "Your body can't heal properly without proper nutrition. So yes, I'm trying to get some actual meat on your bones. Eat." Lena ate, and ate, and ate. At first her stomach protested the sheer quantity, but Silas just cut her portions smaller and more frequent. 5 small meals instead of 3 large ones. Snacks between. Constantly eating. "Won't run out?" she asked, worried. "I've got enough stored to feed 10 people through the winter. You're fine." Afternoons, Silas would work on whatever needed doing around the cabin while Lena rested. He'd chop wood, check his traps, tend to the small greenhouse he'd built against the south wall, where he grew herbs and vegetables year-round. Sometimes he'd read from his extensive book collection, medical texts mostly, but also history and philosophy. Evenings, they'd talk. It started small, Silas asking about her injuries, her recovery. But slowly, carefully, he'd draw out other things. Her life before the inn. Her family, dead, all of them, swept away by fever when she was 12. How she'd ended up working for Marcus Hale. Desperation, nowhere else to go. What she'd done there, kitchen work, endless kitchen work, beaten if she was too slow or too clumsy, or just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He never pushed, never demanded, just asked gentle questions and listened to whatever she was willing to give. In return, he told her about the people he'd helped. Not names, he never used names, but stories. The young woman who'd been sold by her own father to pay his gambling debts. The boy who'd lost his hand in a mill accident and been thrown out because he couldn't work anymore. The elderly man whose family had decided he was too much trouble to feed. "What happened to them?" Lena asked. "The woman runs a boarding house in the Northern Territories now. Last I heard, she'd married a carpenter. The boy learned to write left-handed, works as a clerk. The old man died, but peacefully, in a warm bed with people who cared about him nearby." Each story was a small defiance against the cruelty of the world below. Each one proof that escape was possible. A week into her stay, Lena woke to find Silas pulling on a heavy coat. "Where are you going?" "Down to the cash point. I need to leave markers for the traders. Let them know I'm still accepting deliveries." He saw her expression. "I'll be back by nightfall. You'll be fine. Food's prepared, fire's stacked. Just rest." "What if someone comes?" "No one comes up here except the people I'm expecting, and we're not expecting anyone until spring." He paused at the door. "But if someone does knock, don't answer. Just stay quiet until they leave." He was gone before Lena could argue. The cabin felt enormous without him in it. Too quiet. Too empty. Lena sat by the fire, her ribs still aching but healing, and tried not to think about how vulnerable she was. How easily someone could break down that door. How she wouldn't be able to run, couldn't fight back, couldn't... She forced herself to breathe, to think rationally. Silas had been doing this for years. He knew what he was doing. He wouldn't have left her alone if it wasn't safe. Probably. The day crawled past. Lena dozed, read one of Silas's books, a medical text she barely understood, ate the food he'd left prepared, watched the light change outside the window. He returned just as the sun was setting, stomping snow off his boots at the door. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Fine." Lena hated how relieved she sounded. Everything was fine. Something in his expression softened. "Good. I brought fresh supplies." He held up a canvas bag, including coffee. Real coffee, not the chicory mixture. Thought we'd earned it. That night, they sat by the fire, drinking coffee so rich and strong it made Lena's eyes water. Outside, wind howled around the cabin, but inside it was warm and safe and almost comfortable. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said. "Always." "Why stay? Up here, I mean. You could go north yourself, live in the free territories, be a real doctor again." Silas was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee cup. "I thought about it. After the merchant's daughter, I ran. Kept running until I ended up here. Figured I'd just hide until things blew over, then move on." He took a sip. "Then the first person arrived. Young man, maybe 18, beaten so badly I wasn't sure he'd survive the night. But he did. And when he was healed, I helped him get north. And then more came. And then more came." Silas nodded. "I realized I could do something here. Something that mattered. If I left, who would help them? Who would give them that second chance? Someone else. Maybe. Probably not." He set his cup down. "There's a shortage of people willing to help, Lena. Everyone's got their own problems, their own struggles. Most folks figure it's not their business if someone's getting beaten or sold or worked to death. Easier to look away. But you don't?" "No." He met her eyes. "I don't." Lena understood then, really understood, what he'd given up to stay here. Not just his career or his reputation, but any chance at a normal life. Friends, family, the simple pleasures of living in a town with other people. He'd traded all of it to be a ghost on a mountain, saving people no one else would save. 2 weeks became 3. 3 became 4. Lena's ribs healed. The bruises faded from purple to yellow to gone. Her frostbitten toes recovered fully. She started helping around the cabin, small things at first, then bigger ones, cooking, cleaning, organizing Silas's extensive herb collection. "You don't have to," he said when he found her scrubbing the floor. "I want to. I'm going crazy just sitting around." He didn't argue. Just showed her where everything was kept, how he liked things organized, which herbs were which. Lena discovered she was good at it. The careful sorting, the precise measurements, the methodical work of preparing medicines. It reminded her of cooking, but with higher stakes. "You have a steady hand," Silas observed one afternoon, watching her grind dried herbs with a mortar and pestle. "And you're careful. Those are important qualities in medicine. I just follow your instructions." Following instructions is harder than you'd think. Most people rush or second guess. You just do it right. He paused. "If you wanted, I could teach you more. Proper medicine. How to treat wounds, set bones, mix remedies." Lena looked up. "Why would you do that?" "Because you're smart and capable, and you deserve to learn something more useful than how to peel potatoes for an ungrateful bastard." He said it matter-of-factly. "And because we've got all winter, might as well use the time productively." So Lena became his apprentice. She learned the properties of willow bark for pain, how to make poultices from yarrow and plantain, the difference between a sprain and a break, how to clean and dress a wound properly, when to use heat versus cold, the signs of infection. Silas was a patient teacher, explaining everything twice, demonstrating before letting her try. He never got frustrated when she made mistakes, just corrected her gently and had her try again. "Medicine is practice," he said. "No one gets it perfect the first time, or the 100th time. You just keep learning." The winter deepened. Snow piled higher around the cabin until only the chimney and the very top of the door were visible. They dug themselves out daily, creating a narrow tunnel to the woodshed and the greenhouse. The world shrank to just the cabin, just the two of them, just the daily routines of survival and study. Lena found herself content, maybe for the first time in her life. She wasn't happy. Happiness seemed like too big a word for what she felt. But she was fed, warm, learning, healing. No one hit her. No one screamed at her. No one looked at her like she was garbage. It was enough. One evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Silas looked up from the medical text he was reading. "You've put on weight?" Lena tensed automatically. "That's good," he continued, oblivious to her reaction. "You were dangerously underweight. Now you're just normal, healthy even." She relaxed slightly. At the inn, gaining weight would have earned comments, mockery, sometimes worse, but Silas said it like it was a medical fact, no judgment attached. "I've been eating a lot," she admitted. "You needed to, still do." He went back to his book. "Don't let anyone make you feel bad about taking up space, Lena. Your body's allowed to exist." The simple kindness of it hit her unexpectedly hard. She had to look away, blinking against sudden tears. Winter's deepest point came in late January. The temperatures dropped so low that frost formed on the inside of the windows despite the fire. They wrapped themselves in every blanket Silas owned and stayed close to the hearth, only going outside when absolutely necessary. "This is the worst of it," Silas said, banking the fire for the night. "Another month and it'll start warming up. By March, the snow will begin melting. April, the passes will open." April, when she'd have to make her choice, north to the free territories or something else. Lena didn't let herself think about it yet. One day at a time. February brought the first signs of spring. The days grew incrementally longer. The wind lost some of its vicious bite. Icicles began forming along the roof edge as daytime melting turned to nighttime refreezing, and Silas became restless. Lena noticed it in small ways. How he'd stand at the window longer than necessary, staring down the mountain. How he'd check and recheck his supplies. How he'd go quiet in the middle of conversations, listening to something she couldn't hear. "What is it?" she finally asked. "Spring's coming." He didn't look away from the window. "Which means people will start arriving soon." "That's good, isn't it? People you can help." "Yes." But he didn't sound happy about it. It also means the risk increases. More people moving in the mountains, more chance of someone following a trail up here, more... He trailed off. More what? Silas turned to face her. There's something I haven't told you about how this works. Lena waited. The 50 silver marcus got paid? That's standard. An incentive to make sure people actually get sent up here instead of just killed outright. He moved to the table, sat down heavily. But sometimes people regret selling. Sometimes they decide they want their property back. And when that happens, understanding hit Lena like cold water. They come after them. They try. Silas's voice was grim. Usually doesn't work out well for them. The mountain's dangerous if you don't know it, and I have ways of discouraging pursuit. What kind of ways? Instead of answering, he stood and moved to a corner of the cabin Lena had never paid much attention to. He shifted aside a loose floorboard, reached into the hidden space beneath, and pulled out a rifle. Then another. Then a third. Lena stared. I'm a doctor, Silas said, setting the weapons on the table with practiced care. But I'm also a pragmatist. When someone comes up here looking to reclaim their property, I don't let them. He met her eyes. I won't let them take you, Lena. I won't let them take anyone. Do you understand? She nodded slowly. Good. He started checking the rifles, his movements efficient and professional. Hopefully it won't come to that. Most people aren't stupid enough to climb up here in the winter. But come spring, he loaded one of the rifles, set it aside. We'll be ready. That night, Lena lay awake long after Silas had gone to sleep, listening to the wind and thinking about rifles and choices, and the fact that a gentle doctor had 3 guns hidden under his floor. The world she was learning was more complicated than she'd thought. March arrived with melting snow and the first brave birds returning from wherever they'd spent the winter. The trails became muddy, treacherous. The tunnel they'd maintained to the woodshed turned into a slushy mess. Silas's restlessness intensified. He'd make trips down to the cache point every few days, checking for markers, looking for signs of incoming travelers. He taught Lena how to use the rifle, how to load it, aim it, clean it. I don't want to shoot anyone, she protested. Neither do I. But wanting and needing are different things. He adjusted her stance, correcting her grip. If someone comes through that door meaning you harm, I need to know you can protect yourself, just in case. Just in case he wasn't there. Just in case something happened to him. The unspoken implications hung between them. Lena learned to shoot. The first arrival came on a wet, miserable morning in mid-March. Lena heard it first, someone calling out from down the trail. She froze, knife halfway through cutting bread, and looked at Silas. He was already moving. Stay inside. Lock the door behind me. But lock the door. He grabbed his coat and one of the rifles, heading out into the gray drizzle. Lena watched through the window, her heart hammering as he disappeared down the trail. Minutes crawled past. Then she saw them, Silas and someone else, a woman, thin and soaked through, leaning heavily on his arm. They made their way slowly up to the cabin. Lena unlocked the door, let them in. The woman was young, maybe 20, with a black eye and blood crusted under her nose. She looked at Lena with wild, terrified eyes. It's okay, Silas was saying, his voice calm and steady. You're safe now. This is Lena. She's going to help me get you dried off and warm. Can you tell me your name? Beth. The woman's voice was barely a whisper. My name's Beth. And just like that, Lena understood. This was what Silas did, what he'd been doing, what he'd been preparing for, and now she was part of it. She met Silas's eyes across the cabin, saw the question there. Are you ready for this? Lena took a breath, squared her shoulders, and reached for the medical supplies. She was ready. Beth stayed for 3 weeks. During that time, Lena learned what it really meant to be Silas's assistant. It wasn't just mixing herbs or wrapping bandages, it was holding a terrified woman's hand while Silas reset her dislocated shoulder. It was sitting up through the night when Beth woke screaming from nightmares. It was learning how to talk someone through panic attacks, how to recognize when silence was better than words. She'll be okay, Silas said one evening after Beth had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep. Physically, at least. The rest takes longer. Lena understood that better than he probably realized. Her own bruises had healed months ago, but she still flinched sometimes when Silas moved too quickly. Still caught herself calculating escape routes in every room. Still woke up expecting to find herself back in Marcus Hale's kitchen. "How long did it take you?" Beth asked one afternoon. She was helping Lena prepare vegetables, her movements still careful, favoring her healing shoulder. "Take me for what?" "To stop being scared all the time." Lena paused, knife hovering over a carrot. "I'll let you know when it happens." Beth looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Recognition. They were the same kind of broken. When Beth left in early April, heading north with a pack full of supplies and directions to a town where Silas knew people who'd help her, she hugged Lena hard enough to make her ribs twinge. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Lena watched her disappear down the trail and felt something shift inside her chest. Pride, maybe. Or purpose. She'd helped save someone. Actually helped, not just survived while someone else did the work. "You did good with her," Silas said, coming to stand beside her. "I just did what you told me to do." "No. You knew what she needed before I had to tell you. That's instinct. You can't teach that." He turned to head back inside. 2 more are expected next week. Brothers, both beaten by their employer for trying to organize the other workers. "You ready?" Lena squared her shoulders. "Yeah, I'm ready." The brothers arrived on schedule. Jacob and Thomas Reeves, mid-20s, one with a broken arm, and the other with cracked ribs and a concussion. They were wary at first, suspicious of help that came without a price tag. But Silas's calm competence and Lena's quiet kindness slowly wore down their defenses. "You really just let people go?" Jacob asked one night, watching Silas check his brother's pupils for signs of brain injury. "No strings attached?" "No strings," Silas confirmed. "You heal, you get supplies and directions, you leave. That's the deal." "Why?" "Because someone should." Jacob shook his head like he couldn't quite believe it. "There's got to be a catch." "No catch. Though if you want to send word back once you're settled, let others know there's help available, I wouldn't object. Information saves lives." And that, Lena was learning, was how Silas's network actually worked. Not through advertising or recruitment, but through whispered words passed between desperate people. Former refugees telling new ones, "If you can make it to the mountain, if you can find the doctor, he'll help you. No questions, no judgment, just help." It was a fragile system, dependent on secrecy and trust. One wrong person finding out could bring the whole thing crashing down. The Reeves brothers left in late April, heading north together. The cabin felt empty after they'd gone. "How many more?" Lena asked, helping Silas restock their medical supplies. "Hard to say. Some years we get a dozen, some years just 2 or 3. Depends on how harsh the winter was down in the valley, how desperate the employers are to clear out their problems before summer." He paused, counting bandages. "We're low on willow bark. I'll need to make a run down to the cache point, see if the traders left the supplies I ordered." "I'll come with you." Silas looked at her, surprised. "It's a full day's hike down and back. Your ribs healed weeks ago. I'm fine." Lena met his eyes. "And I'm going stir-crazy in this cabin. I need to move, Silas, please." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, we leave at dawn. Dress warm. It's still cold in the shadows." The hike down was harder than Lena expected. The trail was steep and muddy from snowmelt, treacherous in places where ice still clung to the rocks. But it felt good to move, to use her body for something other than stirring pots and grinding herbs. Her legs burned. Her lungs ached in the thin mountain air. She loved it. "You're smiling," Silas observed. "I forgot what this felt like, being strong enough to do something hard." "You were always strong enough. You just didn't have the chance to use it." They reached the cache point around midday, a hollow beneath an overhanging rock where traders left supplies in exchange for the silver Silas left there. Sure enough, there were canvas-wrapped bundles waiting, medical supplies, dried goods, coffee, ammunition. Silas was checking the inventory when Lena heard voices. She froze, hand automatically going to the knife at her belt. Silas heard it too. He straightened slowly, eyes scanning the tree line. 3 men emerged from the forest. Local types by their dress, rough clothes, practical boots, hunting rifles slung over their shoulders. One of them Lena recognized with a jolt of pure terror. Marcus Hale. "Well now," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "Heard there was a hermit up in these mountains. Didn't expect to find my property with him." Lena's heart was trying to break through her ribs. "Run!" her instinct screamed. "Hide! Disappear!" But Silas stepped slightly in front of her, his posture relaxed but ready. "She's not your property, Hale. You sold her. Transaction's complete. Sold her to die on your mountain. Instead, I hear she's been living comfortable. That's theft." Marcus spat into the dirt. "I'm taking her back. You can keep your silver." "No." The word was quiet but absolute. Lena had never heard Silas use that tone before. Flat, final, brooking no argument. Marcus's hand drifted toward his rifle. "You protecting stolen property, Doctor. That's a crime." "You beating a woman half to death is also a crime. So is human trafficking. Should we compare legal standing?" Silas's voice remained calm, but Lena could see the tension in his shoulders. "Walk away, Hale. She's under my protection now." "Your protection?" Marcus laughed, harsh and ugly. "You're one man on a mountain. I've got 3 rifles pointed at you." "Actually, you've got 3 rifles pointed in my general direction. None of them are aimed, and if this turns into a shooting situation, I guarantee I'll drop at least 2 of you before you get me." Silas shifted his weight slightly. "Question is, which 2? You want to volunteer?" The men exchanged glances. One of them, younger, nervous, lowered his rifle slightly. "This is ridiculous," Marcus growled. "She's a fat kitchen girl. She's not worth dying over." "Then leave." "I paid good money. You got your 50 silver. Transaction complete. Now you're trespassing on my mountain, threatening me and mine. That gives me legal right to defend my property." Silas's hand moved to rest on his own rifle, still slung across his back. "Last chance, Hale. Walk away." The silence stretched out, taut as a wire. Lena couldn't breathe, couldn't move. She was back in the kitchen, back on the floor, tasting blood and knowing no one would help her. Except someone was helping her. Silas was standing between her and 3 armed men, calling her mine, willing to fight for her. Marcus's face went red with rage. "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is." Silas's voice was tired now. "Go home, Hale. Find some other way to work out your anger issues. This one's done." For a moment, Lena thought Marcus would do it, would raise his rifle and force the confrontation. His hand twitched toward the weapon. Then the younger man spoke up. "Boss, this ain't worth it. She's just one girl. We got other workers." Marcus glared at him, but some of the tension bled out of his shoulders. "Fine, keep the bitch. But if she ever sets foot in my valley again, she's mine. Understand?" Silas didn't respond, just stood there, calm and immovable as a mountain, until Marcus and his men turned and disappeared back into the forest. Only when they were gone did Silas exhale. "You okay?" Lena realized she was shaking. "He came for me. He actually came all the way up here. He's an ass with a bruised ego. Don't read too much into it." Silas started gathering the supplies, his movements quick and efficient. "But we need to move. If he's desperate enough to climb up here once, he might try again, and next time he might bring more men." "What do we do?" "We go home. We prepare. And we make sure he understands that you're not going anywhere." Silas paused, looking at her directly. "Unless you want to. If you'd rather leave, head north now while the passes are open." "No." Lena surprised herself with the force of the word. "No, I'm not running. I'm not giving him that." Something flickered in Silas's expression. Approval, maybe, or respect. "Then let's get moving." The hike back up was faster than the descent, both of them driven by urgency. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was setting and Lena's legs were trembling with exhaustion. Silas immediately started securing the cabin. He checked the rifles, loaded them, positioned them strategically. He reinforced the door with a heavy bar. He showed Lena the escape route he'd prepared, a concealed passage through the back wall that led into the forest. "If someone breaches the front door, you go through here. Don't wait for me, don't argue, just go. Follow the marked trail north. There's a cache hidden 3 miles up with supplies and weapons. You get there, you keep going. Understand?" "I'm not leaving you to Kahat, Lena." He gripped her shoulders, his eyes intense. "If it comes to that, you leaving means I can fight without worrying about you getting caught in the crossfire. You staying makes everything harder, so promise me, if I tell you to run, you run. She wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, but the logic was sound and she could see the genuine fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. I promise, she whispered. Good. He released her, stepped back. Now let's hope it doesn't come to that. They spent the evening in tense silence, both of them starting at every sound from outside. But no attack came, just the wind and the settling noises of the cabin and the distant call of an owl. Get some sleep, Silas finally said around midnight. I'll take first watch. We're doing watches now? For a few days, yeah, until we're sure Hale got the message. He settled into a chair facing the door, rifle across his lap. Go on. I'll wake you in 4 hours. Lena tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's face, heard his voice saying, my property, felt the phantom impact of his fists. When Silas woke her for her watch shift, she was almost grateful. Anything? She asked, taking the rifle he handed her. Quiet. Maybe he really did give up. But Silas didn't sound convinced. Wake me if you hear anything. Anything at all. He was asleep within minutes, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up to him. Lena sat in the chair, rifle heavy in her hands, and watched the darkness beyond the window. She'd never shot anyone, never even considered it, but sitting there, thinking about Marcus coming through that door, thinking about what he'd do to her if he got the chance. Yeah, she could shoot him. Would shoot him if it came to that. The realization should have scared her. Instead, it felt like clarity. Dawn came without incident. Silas woke, checked the perimeter, found nothing disturbed. They went through the day's routines with forced normalcy, cooking, cleaning, tending the greenhouse. But the rifles stayed loaded and close at hand. 3 days passed, then 4, then a week. Maybe he really did give up, Lena said, helping Silas split firewood. Her arms had gotten stronger over the winter. She could swing the axe now without her shoulders screaming. Maybe. But Silas kept scanning the tree line. On the 8th day, a new arrival stumbled up the trail. Lena saw her first. A woman, maybe 40, with a pronounced limp and fresh bruises darkening her face. She recognized the look immediately. Another refugee. Another person sold for silver and sent to die. Silas, she called, and he was already moving. They brought the woman inside, got her warm and fed. Her name was Margaret. She'd been a seamstress until arthritis crippled her hands, and her employer decided she was no longer worth keeping. They told me I was being sent to a workhouse, she said, nursing a cup of hot tea. Paid some trader 50 silver to take me. He just pointed me at the mountain and rode away. You're safe now, Lena told her, with more confidence than she'd felt a year ago. We'll take care of you. And they did. Silas treated her arthritis with anti-inflammatory herbs and warm compresses. Lena taught her the exercises that would keep her hands mobile. They fed her, housed her, slowly brought her back from the edge. Margaret was still with them 2 weeks later when the next person arrived. Then 2 more the week after that. Then another. The cabin became crowded, bustling. Silas and Lena fell into a rhythm. He handled the serious medical cases while she managed the day-to-day care, the cooking, the comfort. They worked together like a well-oiled machine, anticipating each other's needs, covering each other's gaps. You're good at this, Margaret observed one afternoon, watching Lena treat a young man's infected wound. Real good. You think about becoming a doctor? Lena laughed. Me? No, I'm just helping. Helping is what doctors do, honey, and you're doing it better than some certified physicians I've met. The words stayed with Lena. She turned them over in her mind during the quiet moments, during the long evenings after everyone else had gone to sleep, and she was cleaning up the day's medical supplies. Could she? Actually become a doctor, not just Silas's assistant? The idea was absurd. She was a kitchen worker, a piece of property that had been beaten and sold. People like her didn't become doctors. But then again, people like her weren't supposed to survive mountains or stand up to armed men or help heal dozens of refugees either. You're thinking loud, Silas said, making her jump. She hadn't heard him approach. Just something Margaret said? About becoming a doctor? He pulled up a stool beside her. I heard. It's ridiculous. Why? Because I'm... Lena gestured at herself, at her body, at everything she'd been told she was. I'm nobody. I've got no education, no training, no... You've got a steady hand, a sharp mind, and more practical medical experience than most first-year students at the university. Silas cut her off gently. The only thing you're missing is official certification. And honestly, half the doctors with fancy certificates are worse healers than you already are. But no buts. If you want to learn real medicine, I'll teach you. Properly. Everything I know. He met her eyes. You've earned it, Lena. The question is, do you want it? Did she want it? The question rattled around in her head for days. She watched herself work. Treating wounds, mixing medicines, talking patients through their pain and fear. Watched how people responded to her, how they trusted her, how they healed under her care. Yeah, she wanted it. Teach me, she told Silas one evening. Everything. I want to learn everything. His smile was quiet but genuine. All right then. Let's start with anatomy. The lessons began in earnest. Silas had medical textbooks, old ones, worn from use but comprehensive. He'd sketched diagrams on scraps of paper, explaining the musculoskeletal system, the cardiovascular system, how organs worked and what went wrong when they failed. Lena absorbed it all like a sponge, staying up late by lamplight to study, asking questions until Silas's voice went hoarse from answering. You're going to burn yourself out, Margaret warned, finding Lena reading at 2 a.m. Can't. Too much to learn. Learning's good. Collapsing from exhaustion isn't. The older woman sat down beside her. Pace yourself, honey. You've got time. But Lena wasn't sure she did. Summer was here, which meant autumn wasn't far behind. And autumn meant winter, which meant the passes would close and anyone still on the mountain would be stuck there until spring. Most of the refugees had already left, heading north with supplies and directions. Margaret was planning to leave soon, her hands much improved and her strength returned. Soon it would be just Lena and Silas again, alone on the mountain. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it made her anxious. What is it? Silas asked, catching her staring out the window at nothing. I don't know, just feeling like something's wrong, like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's called hypervigilance, common in people who've experienced trauma. Your brain's convinced that peace can't last, so it's constantly scanning for threats. He put down the herb bundle he was preparing. Is there an actual threat, or is this just your anxiety talking? Lena wanted to say it was just anxiety, but that feeling wouldn't go away, that prickle between her shoulder blades, that sense of being watched. I don't know, she admitted. Silas took her seriously. He started doing more frequent perimeter checks, paying closer attention to the trails, and 3 days later, he found it. Someone's been watching the cabin. He came back from his morning check with a grim expression. Fresh boot prints in the mud about 200 yards downslope. Whoever it was stayed there for a while, then left heading back down the mountain. Marcus? Probably. Or someone he sent. Silas started checking the rifles again. We need to be ready. If he's scouting, he is planning something. Should we leave? Head north ourselves? And abandon everyone else who might come up here looking for help? Silas shook his head. No. We stay. We fight if we have to. But we're not running. Margaret overheard. You two are crazy. If dangerous men are coming, you should leave. Can't, Lena said simply. This is too important. Important enough to die for? Lena thought about Beth, scared and broken, healing in this cabin. About the Reeves brothers learning they were worth saving. About all the people who'd come before and all the ones who'd come after. About the fragile network of hope that Silas had built here, one refugee at a time. Yeah, she said. Important enough. Margaret left 2 days later, heading north with the last of the summer travelers. She hugged Lena hard at the door. You're braver than you think, she whispered. Don't forget that. Then she was gone, and the cabin was quiet again. Lena and Silas fell back into their routines, but now they were routines punctuated by rifle practice and perimeter checks. Silas taught her the sight lines around the cabin, the places where attackers might approach, the defensive positions that offered the best coverage. You're preparing for a siege, Lena observed. I'm preparing for possibilities. There's a difference. He showed her how to bar the door from the inside, how to shoot from the windows while staying behind cover. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. August slipped into September. The nights grew colder, the aspens started turning gold, and Marcus Hale came back. Lena was in the greenhouse when she heard the shout. She dropped her watering can and ran for the cabin, her heart in her throat. Silas was already outside, rifle in hand. Standing in the clearing were 5 men, Marcus and 4 others, all armed. But they weren't approaching. They were just standing there at the tree line, watching. "What do you want, Hale?" Silas called. "My property, same as last time." Marcus's voice carried across the distance. "You've had your fun playing doctor. Now give her back." "No." "I'm not asking." Marcus gestured and his men spread out slightly, forming a loose semicircle. "I brought more friends this time. You can't fight us all. Watch me." Lena slipped out of the cabin, taking up position at the window with a rifle like Silas had taught her. Her hands were shaking, but her aim was steady. "You're going to get people killed over one worthless girl?" Marcus sounded genuinely baffled. "She's not worthless, and she's not going anywhere." Silas's voice was steel. "Leave now, and nobody has to die today. You're outnumbered 5-1. 5-2, Lena called out, making her presence known. "And we've got high ground and cover. How many of your men you willing to sacrifice, Marcus?" She saw his face twist with rage even from this distance. "You ungrateful bitch!" The shot came from one of Marcus's men, not from Marcus himself. It went wide, splintering wood near Silas's head. Silas didn't hesitate. He dropped to one knee and fired back, and one of the men screamed and went down clutching his leg. Then everything exploded into chaos. Lena fired toward the muzzle flashes, not aiming to kill, but to suppress, to make them keep their heads down. Silas was doing the same, his shots precise and measured. The clearing filled with gun smoke and shouting. One of Marcus's men broke cover, trying to rush the cabin. Silas dropped him with a shot to the shoulder. Another tried to flank around the side. Lena fired, missed, fired again. The man retreated. "Fall back," someone yelled. Marcus, probably. The shooting stopped. When the smoke cleared, 3 of Marcus's men were down, wounded, not dead, all of them still moving. Marcus and one other man were dragging them back into the tree line. "This isn't over," Marcus shouted. "You hear me? This isn't over." They disappeared into the forest, leaving silence behind. Lena stood at the window, rifle still raised, her whole body shaking. She'd shot at people. Actually, shot at them. Nearly killed someone. "You okay?" Silas was beside her, checking her over for injuries she didn't have. Yeah, I think so." She lowered the rifle carefully. "Did I hit anyone?" "Don't know, don't care. They're gone and we're alive." He moved to secure the door, bar it properly. "But they'll be back. Marcus doesn't give up easy." "What do we do?" Silas was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "We can't stay here. Not anymore. He knows where we are. He knows our defenses. Next time he'll bring more men, better weapons. We'll be trapped. So we run? No, we relocate." He started moving around the cabin, grabbing essential supplies. "There's another cabin, higher up the mountain. Built it years ago as a fallback position. Smaller, harder to find, better defensive position. We take what we can carry and we disappear." "What about the people who might come looking for help?" "I'll leave markers at the cache point, redirect them." He was already packing medical supplies, weapons, food. "Move, Lena. We need to be gone before dark." They worked fast, grabbing everything essential and abandoning the rest. Books, medicines, weapons, food, blankets. Lena took one last look at the cabin that had been her home for almost a year, the place where she'd healed and learned and become someone new. Then she turned her back on it and followed Silas up the mountain. The higher cabin was exactly as he'd described. Small, rough, but solid. Built into the side of the mountain with rock on 3 sides and a narrow entrance that could be easily defended. Inside was basic. A fireplace, sleeping platforms, shelves for storage. No luxuries, just survival. "We'll be cramped," Silas said, stacking their supplies. "But safe. No one knows about this place except me." Lena helped him organize, her mind still racing. "How long do we stay here?" "Until Marcus gives up or winter closes the passes. Whichever comes first." He started building a fire. "Then we figure out our next move." That night, huddled around the small fire with the wind howling outside, Lena finally let herself feel the fear she'd been suppressing. They'd shot at people, been shot at, nearly died. and Marcus wasn't going to stop. "Hey," Silas's voice was gentle. "We're okay. We're safe." "For how long?" "Long enough." He handed her a cup of tea made from their dwindling supply of herbs. "We'll figure this out, Lena. We always do." She wanted to believe him, wanted to have his certainty. But sitting there in the darkness, listening to the wind, she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still coming. And 3 days later, she was proven right. The smoke was visible from miles away. Lena saw it first, a dark column rising from where the old cabin stood. She grabbed Silas's arm, pointing wordlessly. They'd been checking one of the trap lines, gathering what little game they could before winter set in hard. "He burned it," Silas said quietly. His face was unreadable. "That son of a bitch actually burned it." They stood there watching their former home go up in flames, too far away to do anything except witness the destruction. A year's worth of work, of shelter, of sanctuary for dozens of people, reduced to ash and smoke because one man couldn't let go of his pride. "All those medical supplies," Lena whispered. "The books. Everything we couldn't carry. Gone." Silas's jaw was tight. "He's sending a message. If he can't have you, nobody gets to have anything." They watched until the smoke began to thin, until there was nothing left to see. Then they turned and hiked back to the upper cabin in silence, both of them processing what this meant. Marcus wasn't going to give up, wasn't going to get bored and move on. He was going to keep coming, keep destroying, until either he got what he wanted or someone stopped him permanently. "We need to leave," Lena said that night, staring into their small fire. "Actually leave. Head north before he finds this place, too." "He'll follow." Silas was sharpening his hunting knife, the rhythmic scrape of stone on steel filling the silence between words. "Men like Marcus don't stop at borders. He'll track us down, claim we stole his property, probably get the local authorities on his side." "So what do we do? Just wait here for him to find us?" "No, we make him regret ever coming after us in the first place." The knife paused mid-stroke. "We fight back. Properly this time." Lena looked at him, this gentle man who'd saved so many lives, who'd taught her medicine and kindness. "You mean kill him?" "I mean stop him. However that needs to happen." Silas met her eyes. "I've been trying to avoid this, trying to find a peaceful solution. But peace only works when both sides want it. Marcus wants blood, so maybe that's what he needs to get." The words hung heavy in the air. Lena thought about the Marcus she'd known, brutal, petty, incapable of empathy. Thought about all the people he'd hurt over the years, all the lives he'd ruined. Thought about what he'd do if he actually got his hands on her again. "Okay," she said. "So how do we do this?" They spent the next 2 days planning. Silas knew the mountain better than anyone. Every trail, every ravine, every place where the rocks got slippery or the ice stayed year-round. He drew maps in the dirt, marking positions, angles of approach, choke points. "He'll come up the main trail," Silas explained. "It's the only one wide enough for a group. If we're smart, we can funnel them exactly where we want them. And then what? Then we make them understand that some fights aren't worth winning." He looked up from the map. "I'm not planning to kill anyone, Lena, but I am planning to make damn sure they know what'll happen if they keep coming." The trap was simple but effective. They spent a full day hauling rocks, building a carefully balanced pile at a narrow point on the trail where the mountain dropped away sharply on one side. A trigger rope, nearly invisible in the shadows. One good pull and several 100 pounds of stone would come crashing down. "Won't kill anyone," Silas said, testing the rope tension. "But it'll block the trail, maybe injure a few, force them to retreat. And if they don't retreat? Then we've got positions here and here." He pointed to 2 spots on his map, "where we can shoot down at them without being seen. They'll be exposed, we'll be hidden. They won't be able to advance without taking casualties." It was a good plan, a solid plan. Lena tried to take comfort in that as they finished the preparations, stashing extra ammunition at the firing positions, marking their own paths so they could move quickly in the dark. But plans, she was learning, rarely survived contact with reality. Marcus came 5 days later, and he didn't come up the main trail. Lena woke to Silas's hand over her mouth, his eyes wide in the darkness. "They're here," he breathed. "West approach. Must have found a scout who knew the back trails." She was up and moving before fully awake, grabbing her rifle, following Silas out into the pre-dawn cold. They could hear them now, the crunch of boots on frost, the low murmur of voices trying to stay quiet. "How many?" Lena whispered. "At least 8. Maybe more." Silas was already moving toward the defensive position they'd prepared on this side of the cabin. "All our traps are on the main trail. We're going to have to do this the hard way." The hard way turned out to be brutal and desperate. Marcus's men came at dawn when the light was tricky and the shadows still deep. They spread out, trying to surround the cabin, clearly expecting the same layout as the lower one. But this cabin was different, built into the mountain itself, with limited approach angles. The first man who stepped into the clearing took a round from Silas's rifle and went down screaming. The others scattered, taking cover behind rocks and trees. "Rourke!" Marcus's voice echoed across the clearing. "Send out the girl, and we'll leave. Nobody else has to get hurt." "Go to hell, Hale!" Bullets started flying. Lena fired from her position, aiming for muzzle flashes, trying to keep heads down. Beside her, Silas worked his rifle with methodical precision, each shot carefully placed, but there were too many of them. They were getting closer, using the terrain, coordinating their movements. Professional fighters, not the random thugs Marcus had brought before. "He hired mercenaries," Silas muttered, reloading. Damn it, he actually hired professionals. A bullet smacked into the rock near Lena's head, showering her with stone fragments. She flinched back, momentarily blinded. When her vision cleared, 2 men were rushing the cabin. Silas dropped one. Lena fired at the other, missed, fired again. The man stumbled but kept coming. She fired a 3rd time, and he went down for good. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely reload. "Fall back!" Silas was pulling her toward the cabin. "Inside now!" They scrambled through the narrow entrance, barred it behind them. Immediately, bullets started hammering the door, the shuttered windows. The cabin filled with the smell of gun smoke and fear. "They're going to burn us out," Lena said, coughing. "Just like the other cabin." "Not if we burn them first." Silas was moving to the back of the cabin, pulling up a hidden floor panel. Underneath were bottles, glass filled with clear liquid. "Coal oil. I've been saving it." "You're going to make fire bombs?" "I'm going to create a distraction." He was already tearing strips from a blanket, stuffing them into the bottlenecks. "When I light these and throw them, it'll force them to move. That's when we run. Out the back passage into the rocks. They won't be able to follow us there. Terrain's too rough for group movement." "And then what?" "Then we make for the border. 3 days hard hiking. If we can reach the free territories, we're safe. Marcus has no authority there." Outside, the shooting had stopped. Lena could hear wood being gathered, kindling being prepared. They were going to burn them out after all. "Now or never," Silas said, lighting the first bottle. The cloth caught immediately. He threw it through the window. The explosion was smaller than Lena expected, but the effect was immediate. Screaming, shouting, men scrambling away from the flames. Silas threw another bottle, then another, creating a wall of fire between the cabin and Marcus's men. "Go! Now!" Lena went through the back passage, a narrow crack in the rock that barely fit her shoulders. Behind her, Silas was following, pulling supplies. They emerged into the boulder field behind the cabin, scrambling over rocks slick with morning frost. Bullets followed them, but the angle was bad, the shots wild. They kept moving, putting distance and stone between themselves and their attackers. "There!" someone shouted. They're heading for the ridgeline." More shooting. A bullet spanged off rock near Lena's foot. She jumped, lost her footing, started to slide. Silas caught her arm, hauled her up. "Keep moving. Don't stop." They ran, climbed, scrambled over terrain that would have been treacherous even without people shooting at them. Lena's lungs burned in the thin air. Her legs screamed, but she didn't stop. Behind them, she could hear pursuit. Voices. The occasional gunshot. Marcus wasn't giving up. They reached the ridgeline as full dawn broke. The border territories spread out before them, miles of wilderness, freedom if they could reach it. But between here and there was nothing but rough country and the men hunting them. "This way." Silas led them along the ridge, moving fast. "There's a game trail that drops down the north face, steep but passable. They won't expect us to go that way." The trail turned out to be less a trail and more a suggestion scratched into the mountainside. Narrow, crumbling, with a drop-off that made Lena's stomach turn. but it was their only option. Halfway down, the shooting started again. Marcus's men had reached the ridgeline, were firing down at them. Bullets kicked up dirt and stone. "Faster!" Silas urged. Lena's boot slipped on loose scree. For a terrifying moment, she was falling, sliding toward the edge. Her hand shot out, caught a scraggly bush. It held. Barely. Silas grabbed her other arm, pulled her back onto the trail. "I've got you. Come on." They kept descending. The trail got worse, narrower, more treacherous. But the shooting stopped. Even Marcus's mercenaries weren't stupid enough to try climbing down while firing. They reached the bottom as the sun hit its peak. A narrow valley stretched ahead, heavy forest on both sides. Sanctuary, if they could reach it. 3 days, Silas said, checking their supplies. 3 days to the border. We've got enough food and ammunition if we're careful. And if they follow us? Then we keep moving and hope we're faster. He looked at her, his face grim. "You ready for this?" Lena thought about turning back, about trying to negotiate, about any option that didn't involve 3 days of running through wilderness with armed men behind them. But there was nothing back there except death or slavery. Forward was the only direction that mattered. "Ready," she said. They moved through the forest at a brutal pace, stopping only when absolutely necessary. Silas navigated by the sun and landmarks Lena couldn't even see, leading them deeper into territory he'd clearly scouted years ago. That first night they made a cold camp, no fire, eating dried meat and hardtack in the darkness. Lena's whole body ached, her feet were blistered. Her ribs, long since healed, throbbed with phantom pain from the exertion. "Get some sleep," Silas whispered. "I'll take watch." "We should both sleep. We need the rest." "Can't. Not with them behind us." He was scanning the darkness, rifle ready. "Sleep, Lena. That's an order." She wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. She curled up in her blanket and was asleep within minutes. Silas woke her before dawn, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "They're close. Found our trail. We need to move." The second day was worse than the first. They pushed harder, faster, barely stopping. Twice they heard voices behind them. Marcus's men, tracking them through the forest. Each time they had to change direction, adding miles to their journey. By nightfall, Lena was stumbling more than walking. Her vision kept blurring. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. "Just a little further," Silas kept saying. "Just a little more." They made it to a small stream before she collapsed, just sat down in the mud and couldn't make herself get up. "I can't," she whispered. "I'm sorry, I just can't." Silas knelt beside her, checking her over with professional efficiency. "You're dehydrated and exhausted. Drink." He pressed his water skin into her hands. Slow sips, not too much at once. The water helped. A little. But her body was done. Spent. Nothing left to give. "How much further to the border?" she asked. "If we push through the night, we could make it by dawn." "I can't push through the night. I can barely stand." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a decision. "We camp here. Properly this time. Small fire, hot food. You need to recover or you won't make it at all. But they're following. Let them follow. I'd rather fight them on full stomachs and a few hours' sleep than collapse from exhaustion before we reach safety." He was already gathering kindling. "Besides, we're close enough to the border now that we might run into patrols. Free Territory Rangers. If we can reach them, we're safe." The fire felt like a gift from heaven. Silas heated water, made tea from the herbs they'd brought, cooked a proper meal of rice and dried vegetables. Lena ate mechanically, barely tasting it, but feeling strength slowly return. "Tell me something," she said, watching the flames. "If we don't make it, if they catch us, what happens to all those people you helped? Who keeps the network running?" "There are others. Not many, but some. People who know what I do, who help when they can. The network will survive." He poked at the fire. "But we're going to make it, Lena, so stop thinking like that." "How can you be sure?" "Because I didn't spend a year teaching you medicine just to let Marcus Hale win." His voice was firm. "We've come too far. You've come too far. We're not dying in these woods." His certainty was infectious, or maybe it was just the hot food and the fire. Either way, Lena felt something in her chest unclench slightly. "Get some sleep," Silas said. "Real sleep this time. I'll wake you in 4 hours and we'll switch. She slept hard, dreamlessly, and woke to Silas shaking her shoulder urgently. They're here, he whispered. Found our camp, maybe a half-mile back. Lena was up and moving before her brain fully engaged. They kicked dirt over the fire, grabbed their packs, started moving. But this time she could feel it. The hunters were close. Too close. Dawn was just breaking when they heard the shout. There, I see them! Bullets started flying. Lena and Silas ran, crashing through underbrush, sliding down embankments. The forest erupted around them, men shouting, more gunfire, the sounds of pursuit getting closer. The river! Silas pointed ahead to where water glinted through the trees. That's the border. Cross it, and we're in free territory. They burst out of the forest onto a rocky bank. The river was maybe 40 feet wide, running fast with snowmelt. Cold, dangerous. But on the other side was freedom. Behind them, Marcus's men were breaking through the tree line. Go! Silas shoved Lena toward the water. Cross now! She waded in, and the cold hit like a physical blow. The current tried to sweep her feet out from under her. She fought forward, step by step, the water rising to her waist, her chest. Silas was right behind her, providing cover fire. She heard him shoot, heard someone scream, heard Marcus's voice roaring orders. Halfway across, Lena's foot slipped on a submerged rock. She went under, swallowed water, came up gasping. The current had her now, pulling her downstream. She fought against it, kicking hard, her pack weighing her down like an anchor. Strong hands grabbed her arm. Silas, his face set with determination, dragging her toward the far bank. They stumbled out together, soaked and freezing, and collapsed on the rocks. On the other side of the river, Marcus and his men had reached the bank. They stood there, weapons raised, but not shooting. That's free territory, one of the mercenaries said, loud enough to carry. We cross that river, we're in violation of treaty, could start a war. Marcus's face was purple with rage. I don't care about... Well, I do. The mercenary lowered his rifle. I signed on to retrieve stolen property, not start an international incident. Job's done. She's across the border. She's not coming back. Let it go. I paid you to pay. You paid me to track and retrieve. I tracked. Can't retrieve across international borders. The mercenary was already turning away. Take it up with the magistrate if you want. File a claim, do it legal, but I'm not crossing that river. One by one, the other men lowered their weapons. Marcus stood there alone, shaking with fury, staring across the water at Lena and Silas. This isn't over, he screamed. You hear me? I'll file charges. I'll get the law on my side. They'll extradite you back. Silas pulled Lena to her feet. We need to move. Get deeper into territory before he decides to risk it anyway. They stumbled away from the river into the forest beyond. Behind them, Marcus was still shouting, but his voice got fainter with each step, until finally it disappeared entirely. They walked for another hour before Silas finally stopped. We should be safe now, deep enough that even if he did cross, he'd never find us. Lena sank to the ground, her whole body shaking, from cold, from exhaustion, from the adrenaline finally wearing off. They'd made it, actually made it. We need to get you warm, Silas said, already gathering wood. You're hypothermic. He built a fire, bigger than was probably safe, and stripped off her wet clothes without ceremony, wrapping her in both their blankets. The shaking got worse before it got better, her body trying to generate heat it didn't have. Stay with me, Silas kept saying. Come on, Lena, stay awake. She tried, forced her eyes open, focused on the fire, on Silas's face. Slowly, gradually, warmth returned. The shaking subsided. Her brain started working again. We made it, she said. Her voice sounded distant, strange. We made it. Silas smiled, actually smiled. Welcome to the free territories. They stayed by that fire for hours, waiting for Lena to fully recover. Silas kept watch, changing his own wet clothes, checking their supplies. They'd lost some things in the river crossing, but the essentials were intact. Food, weapons, the medical supplies they'd managed to grab. When Lena could finally stand without swaying, they started moving again. But this time there was no urgency, no fear, just steady progress through friendly territory. They reached the first settlement 2 days later. A small border town, rough and practical, full of people who'd come here for the same reason Lena had, because they'd run out of options everywhere else. The ranger station was at the center of town, a solid building flying the Free Territory flag. Silas led them straight to it. "We need to report a pursuit across the border," he told the ranger on duty. Armed men from the southern territories. They stopped at the river, but they made threats about legal action. The ranger, a weathered woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, listened carefully. "Names? Marcus Hale, innkeeper from Millbrook Valley, claiming I'm stolen property." Lena forced herself to stand straight, meet the ranger's eyes. "I'm not. I was sold to Dr. Rourke here. Legal transaction. Hale changed his mind after the fact." "You have proof of the sale?" Silas shook his head. "It wasn't exactly a formal contract, more of a understanding." "So it's your word against his." The ranger leaned back in her chair. "If he files for extradition, it'll go to a magistrate. Could get complicated." "What are our options?" Lena asked. "Depends. You planning to stay in the territories?" "Yes." "Then you register as a refugee, claim protection under the sanctuary laws. Takes about a week to process, but once it's done, you're legally a Free Territory citizen. Can't be extradited for alleged crimes in your country of origin." The ranger pulled out a form. "Of course, if the magistrate decides to honor his claim before your papers go through, that's a different story." "How long do we have?" Silas asked. "Before he can file?" "He'd have to go back to Millbrook, make his case to a judge there, get the proper paperwork, then file it with the Border Commission. Then they'd send it here for review. Whole process takes at least a month, usually more." The ranger started filling out the form. "You've got time. Use it wisely." They registered that day. Lena Crowe, refugee, applying for Free Territory citizenship. Silas Rourke, her sponsor, vouching for her character and providing housing. The ranger gave them temporary papers and directions to the settlement office. "You'll need work," she said. "Can't just live on charity here. Everyone contributes." "I'm a doctor," Silas said. "She's my apprentice. We can work." "Doctor?" The ranger's expression changed. "Certified?" "I was. Before I left the South." "We could use a doctor. Town's only got a midwife, and she's been begging for help with the more serious cases." The ranger made a note on her form. "I'll put you in touch with the council. They'll want to verify your credentials, but if you're legitimate, you can probably set up a practice." Just like that, they had a future. Tentative, uncertain, but real. The council met with them the next day. 5 people, all of them practical frontier types who cared more about competence than credentials. Silas demonstrated his skills on a council member with a badly healed broken finger, resetting it properly and explaining the anatomy as he worked. "Good enough for me," the council leader said, watching Silas wrap the finger in a splint. "We've got an empty building on 2nd Street. Used to be a general store. You can convert it to a clinic. Town will provide basic supplies to start. You pay it back through service. Sound fair?" "More than fair," Silas said. They moved into the building that afternoon. It was rough, dusty, full of old inventory, in need of serious cleaning, but it had 4 walls, a roof, and potential. Lena stood in the middle of what would become their clinic, looking around at the space, and felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope, maybe, or possibility. "What do you think?" Silas asked. "I think we've got a lot of work to do." She smiled. "Let's get started." They spent the first week just cleaning, sweeping out years of dust and mouse droppings, scrubbing floors until Lena's hands cracked and bled, hauling out broken shelving and rotted inventory. The work was hard and unglamorous, but there was something deeply satisfying about it. Every board they ripped out, every corner they swept clean, was one more step towards something that belonged to them. "This is going to be the exam room," Silas said, marking off a space near the back. "We'll need a table, good lighting, storage for supplies. And this?" Lena gestured to the larger front area. "Waiting room. People need somewhere to sit while they're hurting. Makes them feel like we actually care." He paused, looking around. "We'll need beds too, for patients who need monitoring overnight." The scope of what they were building began to dawn on Lena. This wasn't just a clinic, it was a real medical practice. A place where people would come expecting professional care, trusting them with their lives. "Silas," she said carefully, I'm not a real doctor. I'm barely an apprentice. What if someone comes in with something I can't handle? Then you come get me, or you figure it out using what I've taught you. He met her eyes. You're better than you think, Lena. Stop selling yourself short. The first patient showed up before they'd even finished cleaning. A young mother with a screaming infant, the baby's face flushed with fever. Please, the woman said, near tears herself. The midwife's out at a birthing. They said there might be a doctor here. Silas took the baby, his hands gentle despite the noise. How long has she been feverish? 2 days? She won't eat, won't sleep, just cries and cries. Lena watched Silas work, examining the infant with practiced efficiency, checking the ears, throat, lymph nodes. His face gave nothing away, but she'd learned to read the small signs, the slight relaxation of his shoulders, the way his jaw unclenched. Ear infection, he said finally. Painful but treatable. I'll give you some willow bark tea for the fever and pain. Warm compresses on the ear, 4 times daily. She should start improving within a day or 2. I don't have much money, the mother said, but I can pay. Pay what you can, when you can. Right now, just focus on getting your daughter healthy. Silas was already measuring out herbs, explaining the dosage to Lena as he worked. If she's not better in 3 days, bring her back. Word spread fast. By the end of the week, they had a steady stream of patients. Nothing dramatic. Mostly minor injuries, chronic aches, the everyday ailments of frontier life. But each one was an opportunity for Lena to learn, to practice what Silas had taught her. She set her first bone on a farmer who'd gotten his hand caught in a piece of machinery. Silas talked her through it, but she did the work, feeling for the break, pulling the bone back into alignment while the farmer cursed and sweated. The splint went on crooked the first time, and she had to redo it, her hands shaking. Better, Silas said when she'd finished the second attempt. Not perfect, but good enough. He'll heal. Good enough became her standard. Not the flawless work of a trained physician, but competent care delivered with genuine concern. The patients didn't seem to mind. They just wanted someone who'd listen, who'd try to help, who wouldn't charge them more than they could afford. 3 weeks into their new life, the ranger showed up at the clinic. Got news, she said, her expression unreadable. Marcus Hale filed his claim. Came through this morning. Lena's stomach dropped. Already? You said it would take at least a month. He must have paid for expedited processing. Rich men can speed things up when they're motivated. The ranger pulled out a document. He's claiming you as stolen property, alleging doctor. Rourke here violated the terms of sale by not delivering you for your intended purpose. Which was to die on his mountain, Silas said flatly. Which he's not putting in the paperwork, obviously. He's claiming breach of contract. The ranger set the document on the exam table. The magistrate will hear the case in 2 weeks. You'll need to present your defense. What kind of defense? Lena asked. It's my word against his. He'll say I was sold for labor. I ran away. What proof do I have otherwise? You have your injuries, the documented evidence of abuse. Silas gestured at the scars still visible on her arms, the place where her ribs had broken. We can show what he did to you. That proves he beat me. Doesn't prove the sale was for murder. Lena sat down heavily. He'll just say I was clumsy, accident-prone. He'll have witnesses from the inn who'll swear they never saw him hit me. The ranger cleared her throat. There might be another option. If you could prove a pattern of this behavior, other people he's sold under false pretenses, other workers he's abused, the magistrate might rule in your favor based on character evidence. How would we prove that? Silas asked. Find the people. Get them to testify. The ranger shrugged. I know it's a long shot. Most people who escape don't want to come back and relive their trauma in a courtroom. But if you could find even 2 or 3 willing to speak. After the ranger left, Lena and Silas sat in silence, processing. 2 weeks. They had 2 weeks to build a case, or she'd be extradited back to Millbrook Valley, back to Marcus, back to everything she'd escaped. We find them, Silas said finally. The people I helped over the years. We send word through the network, ask who's willing to come testify. That could take months. We have 2 weeks. Then we work fast. He was already moving, pulling out paper to write letters. I know where some of them went. Beth, the Reeves brothers, Margaret. If we can track down even a few. They spent the next 3 days writing letters and sending them through every contact they could reach. Silas knew people. Merchants who traveled the territories, former refugees who'd settled in various towns, members of the informal network that helped runaway workers find freedom. The letters went out in every direction, urgent pleas for help. Meanwhile, the clinic couldn't stop. Patients kept coming. A child with a broken arm, an elderly man with pneumonia, a worker who'd been kicked by a horse. Lena and Silas worked from dawn until well past dark, treating injuries and illnesses while waiting for responses that might never come. "You should eat," Silas said one evening, finding Lena still working by lamplight, updating patient records. "I'm not hungry." "You're running yourself into the ground. That doesn't help anyone." He set a plate of food in front of her. "Eat. Sleep. We do this smart, not desperate." But desperate was exactly how Lena felt. The hearing was in 10 days now. 9. 8. And no word from any of the people they'd contacted. On day 7, someone knocked on the clinic door well after closing time. Lena answered it, expecting an emergency. Instead, she found Beth standing there, older and steadier than Lena remembered, with a man beside her. "Heard you needed witnesses," Beth said simply. "I came." Lena nearly collapsed with relief. "You got the letter. I didn't know if it would reach you. Took some doing. I'm in a town 2 weeks' ride north now. Married Thomas here." She gestured at the man. "When I got your message, we closed the shop and came straight down." "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." Beth's expression was firm. "You and Dr. Rourke saved my life. Literally. I'm not letting Marcus Hale drag you back to that hell." They came in, and Lena made tea while Beth told her story. She'd made it north, found work at a boarding house, met Thomas, who ran the general store next door. They'd married last spring, opened a small shop together. She had a life now, a real life. "I'll testify," Beth said, "whatever you need me to say. Just the truth. What Marcus did to you. Why you were sent up the mountain." Silas was taking notes, preparing for the hearing. "The magistrate needs to see the pattern." "He beat me for smiling at a customer," Beth said quietly. "Said I was trying to seduce his guests, ruin his reputation. Broke 2 of my fingers and told everyone I'd slammed them in a door. When I couldn't work properly anymore, he sold me, told the trader I was being sent to a workhouse. I only found out I was heading to the mountain when the trader pointed me at the trail and rode away." It was Lena's story. Almost exactly. Different details, same brutality. "How many others did he do this to?" Lena asked. "I don't know. I was only there 8 months. But there were others before me who just disappeared. We all knew what it meant when Marcus said someone was going to a workhouse." Over the next 3 days, more people arrived. Jacob Reeves came alone. His brother had settled too far north to make the trip, but he sent a written statement. Margaret showed up with her new employer, a seamstress who'd hired her despite the arthritis. A young man named Peter who'd been one of Silas's first rescues, now working as a carpenter's apprentice. Each of them had the same story. Worked for Marcus, or someone like him. Got injured or sick or just too inconvenient. Got beaten, sold, sent to die. Only survived because Silas had been there to catch them. "This is good," the ranger said when she came to check on their progress. "This is really good. 5 witnesses, all with similar stories, all corroborating the pattern of abuse and human trafficking. The magistrate will have to take it seriously." "Will it be enough?" Lena asked. "I don't know. Depends on the magistrate, depends on what kind of lawyer Marcus brings. Depends on a dozen factors we can't control." The ranger looked at the assembled group. "But you've got a real case now. That's more than most people have." The hearing was set for the town hall, neutral territory. Lena dressed in her best clothes, which weren't much, just a simple dress Beth had helped her alter to fit properly. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Not the broken, beaten thing Marcus had sold. Someone different. Someone who'd survived and grown stronger. "Ready?" Silas asked. "No, but let's do this anyway." The hall was packed. Apparently public hearings were entertainment in frontier towns. Lena recognized faces from the clinic. Townspeople who'd come to see how the new doctor's case would play out. The ranger was there in official capacity. The council members sat in the front row watching with interest. And there, across the room, was Marcus Hale. He looked smaller than Lena remembered. Still mean, still radiating that casual cruelty, but somehow diminished. Maybe it was the context. Here he was just another man making a claim, not a tyrant ruling his little kingdom. Maybe it was that Lena herself had changed, grown, learned she didn't have to flinch anymore. The magistrate was a stern woman named Harriet Cross, known throughout the territories for her no-nonsense approach to justice. She called the hearing to order and laid out the basics. Marcus Hale, innkeeper of Millbrook Valley, claims that Lena Crowe is his legal property, sold to Silas Rourke under terms that were violated. He's seeking her return and compensation for the breach. Doctor, Rourke and Miss Crowe contest this claim. We'll hear from both sides, examine the evidence, and I'll make my ruling. She looked at Marcus. You're the plaintiff. Present your case. Marcus had brought a lawyer, a slick man from one of the southern cities who talked about contracts and property rights and legal obligations. He painted Lena as a willing worker who'd signed on to work at the inn, proved unsatisfactory, and was humanely transferred to alternative employment rather than simply dismissed. My client acted with compassion, the lawyer said smoothly. Rather than turn Miss Crowe out with no prospects, he arranged employment with Dr. Rourke, who specifically requested workers for his mountain property. He paid 50 silver to facilitate this transfer. When Dr. Rourke failed to utilize Miss Crowe's labor as agreed, and instead harbored her as a refugee, he violated the terms of the arrangement. My client merely seeks what is legally his. It sounded almost reasonable if you didn't know the truth. Then it was their turn. Silas stood up, and Lena was struck by how different he looked. Not the mountain hermit or the frontier doctor, but someone who'd once moved in educated circles. Someone who knew how to command a room. I'd like to present evidence, he said calmly, starting with the physical examination I conducted on Miss Crowe the day she arrived at my cabin. He had notes, detailed clinical notes documenting every injury, every bruise, every broken bone. He walked the magistrate through them, using medical terminology but explaining clearly what each injury meant. 3 broken ribs consistent with repeated blunt force trauma, severe bruising across the back and shoulders, indicating whipping or beating, dislocated jaw, recently reset, frostbite on all toes, malnutrition severe enough to indicate months, possibly years, of inadequate food. He looked directly at Marcus. These are not the injuries of a clumsy worker. These are the injuries of someone who is systematically abused. Marcus's lawyer objected. Injuries don't prove who caused them. My client maintains Miss Crowe was accident-prone. Then let's talk about pattern, Silas interrupted. Because Miss Crowe isn't the only person Mr. Hale has sent to me under these circumstances. Over the past 8 years, I've received 14 workers from Hale's Inn specifically. All of them injured. All of them told they were going to workhouses or alternative employment. All of them arrived at my cabin expecting to die. He called Beth to testify first. She walked to the front with her head high, despite the way her hands shook. My name is Beth Morrison. I worked at the Hale Inn for 8 months. Mr. Hale beat me regularly for minor infractions. When I could no longer work to his satisfaction due to broken fingers, which he caused, he sold me. I was told I was going to a workhouse. I was actually sent to die on a mountain. Can you prove Mr. Hale broke your fingers? The lawyer asked. I can tell you what happened. I smiled at a guest who asked for extra bread. Mr. Hale saw it, accused me of improper conduct. He slammed my hand in a drawer, twice, in front of 3 other workers. She looked at Marcus. You told everyone I'd been clumsy, but we all knew. We always knew. Jacob Reeves went next, telling his story, then Margaret, then Peter. Each one the same essential tale. Work for Marcus, get hurt or become inconvenient, get beaten and sold. By the time they finished, the pattern was undeniable. The magistrate turned to Marcus. Do you have anything to say to these accusations? They're lying. His voice was flat. All of them. They got together and coordinated their stories to avoid legal consequences for running away from legitimate employment. Interesting theory, Magistrate Cross said dryly. Except these people are spread across 4 different territories. Most of them haven't seen each other in years, yet their stories are remarkably consistent. She looked at her notes. You're asking me to believe that 14 separate individuals, over 8 years, all coincidentally got injured at your inn, all coincidentally got sold to the same buyer, and all coincidentally are now lying about it in a coordinated conspiracy. I'm saying they're bitter former employees with an axe to grind. And I'm saying I've heard enough. The magistrate set down her papers. Here's what I see. A pattern of abuse, a pattern of human trafficking disguised as employee transfer, a pattern of workers being sent to die rather than being honestly dismissed or honestly sold into legal servitude. What you did, Mr. Hale, wasn't employment. It was slavery with extra steps. And it ends here. Marcus's face went red. You can't. I absolutely can. Under free territory law, I have full authority to adjudicate claims of illegal bondage. And that's what this is. She turned to Lena. Miss Crowe, do you wish to return to Mr. Hale's employment? No, ma'am. Are you under any legal obligation to do so? Any contract you signed? Any debt you owe? No, ma'am. I never signed anything. Never agreed to work there. My parents died and I had nowhere to go. Marcus gave me a job in exchange for room and board. When I displeased him, he beat me and sold me. That's not employment, that's imprisonment. The magistrate made a note. Based on the evidence presented, I'm ruling that Miss Crowe was never legally Mr. Hale's property. The sale to Dr. Rourke, while irregular, actually represented her rescue from an abusive situation. Therefore, there was no breach of contract because there was no valid contract to begin with. She looked at Marcus. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the territorial marshal for investigation into human trafficking. If even half of what these witnesses claim is true, you've been running a slavery operation under the guise of an inn. That's a crime in the free territories, and we have jurisdiction to prosecute given that the victims are now territorial residents. This is absurd. Marcus's lawyer was on his feet. You can't prosecute him for actions that took place in another jurisdiction. Watch me. The magistrate's voice was steel. The free territories have mutual law enforcement treaties with the southern provinces. If crimes committed there result in victims fleeing here, we absolutely can prosecute, especially when those crimes involve human trafficking. She banged her gavel. Case dismissed. Miss Crowe is free. Mr. Hale, you'll be hearing from the marshal's office. This hearing is adjourned. The room erupted. People cheering, talking, moving. Lena sat frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Free. She was free. Actually, legally free. Beth grabbed her in a hug, then Margaret, then the others. Silas stood back, smiling quietly, watching the celebration. Marcus shoved his way through the crowd, his face twisted with rage. This isn't over. I'll appeal. I'll take this to the high courts. And you'll lose. The ranger stepped into his path. Every time. Because the evidence doesn't lie, Hale. You're done. She's my property. She's a person. She was always a person. And now everyone knows what you are. The ranger's hand rested on her pistol. I suggest you leave, before I decide to hold you for the marshal personally. Marcus looked around the room, saw only hostile faces, and finally seemed to understand. He turned and walked out, his lawyer scurrying after him. Lena watched him go and felt something break loose in her chest. Not relief. Not yet. Just the absence of a weight she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. You all right? Silas asked quietly. I don't know. Ask me tomorrow. She looked at him. We won. You won. I just provided the platform. He smiled. Come on. Let's go home. Home. The clinic. Their clinic. Where patients waited and work needed doing and life continued. They walked back through the evening streets surrounded by the witnesses who'd traveled so far to help. Beth and Thomas, Jacob, Margaret, Peter. People whose lives had been saved by the same network that had saved Lena. What happens now? Margaret asked. Do you all just go back to your lives? I guess so, Beth said, though it feels weird. We came all this way, testified, and now it's just over? Not over, Silas said. Changed. There's a difference. He looked at the group. Marcus will be investigated. Other people he's hurt might come forward. The whole system that allowed this to happen might actually face consequences. What you did today, all of you, that ripples outward. Back at the clinic, they celebrated with the simple food they had on hand, bread and cheese and the last of the cider. Nothing fancy, but it didn't need to be. I should make a toast, Jacob said, raising his cup, to Silas and Lena, for giving us our lives back. To second chances, Beth added. They drank and talked, and slowly the group began to disperse. People had homes to get back to, lives to return to. They said their goodbyes with promises to stay in touch, to write, to never forget. Finally, it was just Lena and Silas in the quiet clinic. "Thank you," Lena said, "for everything, for saving me, teaching me, standing up for me. You don't have to thank me, that's just what you do. When you see someone drowning, you pull them out." He started cleaning up the remnants of the celebration. "Besides, you saved yourself. I just provided the opportunity. Still, I wouldn't be here without you. And I wouldn't have won that case without you having the courage to face Marcus. So, we're even." He paused. "What do you want to do now?" "What do you mean?" "You're free. Legally, officially free. You could go anywhere, do anything. The territories are open to you." He wasn't looking at her, focusing on wiping down the table. "If you wanted to travel, see what else is out there, I'd understand." Lena realized what he was asking, whether she'd stay or go, whether this partnership they'd built would continue or end. She thought about it, really thought about it. Imagined traveling north, seeing new places, starting over somewhere else. The idea had appeal. Freedom meant options. But it also meant leaving behind the clinic, the patients, the work they'd started. It meant leaving Silas, who'd become more than just her teacher or her savior. He'd become family, she supposed. The closest thing she'd had to family in a long time. "I'm staying," she said, "if that's all right with you." He looked up, and she saw relief flash across his face. "More than all right. I could use a partner. The clinic's growing. Too much for one person to handle properly." "Partner? If you want. Equal stake, equal say. We build this thing together." He held out his hand. "What do you say?" Lena looked at his offered hand, at this man who'd changed her life in ways she was still discovering. She thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, broken, beaten, convinced she was worthless, and about who she was now, a healer, a survivor, someone who'd stood up in a courtroom and won. She took his hand. "Partners." They shook on it, and Lena felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't Marcus Hale's property anymore. Wasn't his victim. Wasn't defined by what had been done to her. She was Lena Crowe, doctor's partner, free citizen of the territories, survivor. And she was just getting started. The clinic grew faster than either of them expected. Word spread through the territories about the doctors who'd stood up to a slaver in court, who charged what people could afford, who actually seemed to care whether their patients lived or died. Within 3 months, they were seeing 20 patients a day. Within 6 months, they'd hired help. Sarah was the first. Young, quick-fingered Sarah, who'd watched Lena take her beating at the Hale Inn and done nothing because there was nothing she could do. She showed up at the clinic one afternoon looking terrified and determined in equal measure. "I ran," she said simply. "After the hearing, after everyone found out what Marcus was doing, I couldn't stay there, couldn't keep pretending I didn't know." She twisted her hands together. "I don't have medical training, but I can clean, organize, help however you need, please. I need this to mean something." Lena understood that feeling. The need to transform guilt into action, to make the past count for something other than shame. "Can you read and write?" Silas asked. "Yes, sir. My mother taught me before she died." "Then you can keep records, patient files, inventory, appointments. We're drowning in paperwork, and neither of us has time for it." He glanced at Lena. "If that's all right with my partner." Lena nodded. "Welcome aboard, Sarah. Just no more watching people get hurt and staying silent. Deal?" "Deal." Sarah's eyes were wet. "I'm sorry for not helping you. I was scared. I know, we all were." Lena cut her off gently. "You're here now. That's what matters." They expanded into the building next door when a leather worker retired and sold his shop. Silas took one look at the space and saw possibilities. Rooms for overnight patients, a proper surgery, storage for the growing collection of medical supplies they were accumulating through donations and careful purchasing. "We're becoming a real hospital," Lena said, watching workers knock down the wall between the two buildings. "We're becoming what this town needs." Silas was sketching plans, calculating costs. There are accidents at the mills, the mines. People need somewhere to go that isn't a 3-day ride to the nearest city hospital. The construction took 2 months and most of their savings. But when it was done, They had 6 beds, a dedicated surgical room, and enough space to actually move without bumping into patients. The town council donated supplies. Former patients donated labor. Slowly, piece by piece, something real took shape. Lena's medical skills improved with every patient. She could set bones now without Silas talking her through it, could diagnose common illnesses from symptoms alone, could suture wounds that would have made her queasy a year ago. She still consulted Silas on the complex cases, still deferred to his experience, but more and more she was making decisions on her own. "You're ready," Silas said one evening, reviewing a surgery she'd performed that afternoon. "This is professional-level work, Lena, better than some certified doctors I've known." "I'm not certified, just trained by a fugitive in a mountain cabin." She was trying to make it a joke, but it came out bitter. "So get certified. The Territorial Medical Board doesn't care where you learned, just that you know your stuff. Take their examination. Make it official." The idea terrified her. "What if I fail?" "Then you take it again. But you won't fail." He closed the patient file. "You're good at this. Stop acting like you're still that girl who got beaten in a kitchen. That's not who you are anymore." But some days it was hard to remember that. Some days Lena still flinched when someone moved too fast, still caught herself calculating escape routes, still woke up from nightmares where Marcus was standing over her, fists raised, and no one was coming to help. "How long does it take?" she asked Sarah one afternoon. They were organizing the supply room, a task that had become almost meditative for Lena. "Until you stop being scared all the time?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I don't know if it ever fully stops. I still have nightmares about the inn. Still freeze up when I hear men shouting." She placed a jar of salve on the shelf with careful precision. "But it gets easier. The good days start outnumbering the bad ones. You start to trust that this is real, that it's going to last." "Does it, though? Last?" Lena was thinking about the hearing, about how close they'd come to losing everything. What's to stop someone else from coming after us? Some other Marcus with a different face? Nothing. That's the terrifying part. Sarah turned to face her. "But you know what I figured out? We can't live our lives waiting for the next bad thing. We just have to build something good and defend it when we need to. That's all anyone can do." The marshal's investigation into Marcus Hale took 8 months. When the report finally came through, it was damning. 17 workers confirmed as sold under false pretenses over a 10-year period. Evidence of systematic abuse. Financial records showing payments to traders who specialized in moving difficult employees to remote locations. Marcus was arrested and charged with human trafficking. His inn was seized. The trial was set for the following spring. "Will you testify again?" the marshal asked Lena when he came to inform her. She thought about it, about facing Marcus one more time, about reliving everything in front of a courtroom, about the nightmares it would bring back. "Yes," she said, "I'll testify." Because Sarah was right. You couldn't live in fear of the next bad thing. You just had to face it when it came. The trial was held in the territorial capital, a 3-day journey from their town. Lena and Silas closed the clinic for a week, leaving Sarah in charge of basic care with instructions to send for them if anything serious came up. The capital was bigger than anywhere Lena had ever been. Actual paved streets, buildings 3 stories tall, people everywhere, moving with purpose, going about lives that had nothing to do with survival. "First time in a city?" Silas asked, watching her stare. "First time in anything bigger than a frontier town." She couldn't stop looking around. "How do people live like this? All crammed together?" "You get used to it, or you don't, and you move to a mountain." He smiled slightly. "Come on. The courthouse is this way." The trial lasted 3 days. Prosecutors brought witness after witness, former workers, traders who'd transported people, even a few of Marcus's neighbors who'd suspected something was wrong but never reported it. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus's defense tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, that the workers had been legally sold, and whatever happened after that wasn't his responsibility. But the prosecution had the receipts, literally. Financial records showing Marcus had paid specific traders extra to ensure people didn't make it to their supposed destinations. "He paid for murder," the prosecutor said in closing arguments. "Not directly. He just paid to make problems disappear, knowing full well those problems were people who'd end up dead on mountains or in ravines, or wherever was convenient. That's not employment. That's not even slavery. That's premeditated murder disguised as business. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on 17 counts of human trafficking. Guilty on 9 counts of attempted murder. Guilty on dozens of counts of assault, false imprisonment, and fraud. Marcus showed no emotion as the verdicts were read. Just sat there, staring straight ahead, as if this was happening to someone else. The judge sentenced him to 30 years hard labor in the territorial prison system. Everything he owned would be sold, with the proceeds going to his victims as restitution. Walking out of the courthouse, Lena felt strange. Not happy exactly. Not relieved. Just empty. Like she'd been carrying a weight for so long that its absence left her hollow. "You okay?" Silas asked. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel something. Satisfaction, maybe. Justice served." She watched the crowds moving past. "But I just feel tired." "That's normal. Closure doesn't always feel like what you think it will." He steered her toward a small restaurant. "Come on, let's eat something that isn't frontier cooking. Then we'll go home." Home. The clinic. The patients waiting for them. The life they'd built. They returned to find Sarah had managed fine without them. A few minor injuries, one fever that had responded to standard treatment, nothing she couldn't handle. The clinic was clean, organized, running smoothly. "You did good," Lena told her, reviewing the patient notes. "I had a good teacher." Sarah smiled. "Also, you got mail while you were gone. From the Territorial Medical Board." Lena's stomach clenched. She'd taken their examination before leaving for the trial, spent weeks studying, reviewing everything Silas had taught her. The test had been grueling. Written questions, practical demonstrations, oral examination by a panel of doctors who'd challenged every answer. She'd thought it went well. But what if she'd failed? "You gonna open it?" Silas asked. Lena broke the seal, unfolded the letter, read it twice to make sure she wasn't misunderstanding. She'd passed, with commendations. "I'm certified," she whispered. "I'm actually a certified doctor." "Told you." Silas was grinning. "Dr. Lena Crowe has a nice ring to it." The title felt surreal. Dr. Crowe. Like she was playing pretend, wearing someone else's clothes. But when the first patient came in the next morning, a child with a badly cut hand, and she treated the injury with steady hands and confident decisions, it started to feel real. She was a doctor. Not pretending, not faking it, actually qualified to do this work. The realization settled over her slowly, like snow accumulating. Each patient she treated, each successful surgery, each diagnosis that proved correct. All of it building proof that she belonged here. A year after the trial, a letter arrived from Beth. She and Thomas had expanded their shop, were hiring workers. She wanted Lena to know she was pregnant. "Going to be an aunt," Beth wrote. "Never thought I'd live long enough for that. Thank you for making it possible." More letters came. Jacob Reeves had married, opened a carpentry business. Margaret's arthritis was manageable now. She was teaching young seamstresses her trade. Peter had bought land, was building a house, all of them living, thriving, building lives that had almost been stolen from them. "We should do more," Lena said one evening, reading the letters aloud to Silas. "There are more people out there like we were. More Marcus Hales. We could help them. We are helping them. Every patient we treat, every person who comes here for care, that's helping." Silas was working on a budget, calculating whether they could afford another bed. "That's reactive. I'm talking about proactive, finding the people who need help before they're desperate, building something bigger than just this clinic." Silas set down his pencil, looked at her carefully. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A network. A real one. Not just whispered directions and secret mountain cabins, an actual organization that helps people escape abusive situations and resettle in the territories." The ideas were coming fast now. "We could work with other doctors, merchants, rangers, create safe routes, provide resources, make it so people like Beth and Jacob don't have to nearly die before they get help." "That's ambitious and dangerous. You're talking about organizing what's essentially an underground railroad for refugees." "I know, but someone should do it. And we know how. We've been doing it on a small scale for years." Lena leaned forward. "Think about it. How many people died on your mountain before they reached the cabin? How many more never even tried because they didn't know help existed? We could save them, Silas. Not just treat them after they're broken, actually prevent the breaking. He was quiet for a long time, thinking. Finally, he nodded. All right, let's do it. But we do it smart. Legal where we can be, careful where we can't. We don't help anyone by getting ourselves arrested. They started small. A fund to help refugees pay for travel documents and supplies. Connections with other frontier doctors willing to provide free care. Arrangements with merchants to transport people disguised as hired help. Word spread slowly through the networks that already existed. If you needed to escape, if you were trapped and desperate, there were people who could help. Contact the clinic in Riverside. Ask for Dr. Crowe or Dr. Rourke. They'd find a way. The first person they helped through the new system was a young woman named Alice, sold into a labor contract she hadn't understood until it was too late. She showed up at the clinic with the papers in her hand, asking if they were real, if she was actually bound for 7 years. Lena read through the contract. It was exploitative but technically legal, the kind of thing that trapped people in poverty for years while enriching the employers. "You signed this?" she asked. "I needed work, needed money. They said it was standard." Alice's hands were shaking. "But now they're saying I can't leave, can't see my family, have to work 16-hour days. Is that legal?" "Technically, but there are loopholes." Lena was already writing. "Your contract says you're bound to work for Merchant Collins in exchange for room and board plus a small wage. But it doesn't specify where you have to work. If you were to be employed by someone else who bought out your contract, I don't have money for that." "No, but we do." Lena showed her the letter she'd written. "We'll buy your contract. You'll work for the clinic. Actual work, actual wages, normal hours. After a year, you'll have saved enough to pay us back and buy your freedom. Or you can stay and train as a medical assistant. Your choice." Alice started crying. "Why would you do this?" "Because someone helped me once. Now I'm paying it forward." They helped 3 people that first year, then 7, then 12. Each one a life saved, a future preserved. The clinic had to expand again. More staff, more space, more resources. They were treating 60 patients a day now, employing 8 people, running what was essentially a small hospital. "We need a real administrator," Sarah said during a staff meeting. "Someone to handle the business side so you two can focus on medicine." "We can't afford," Lena started. "Yes, we can. Look at the books." Sarah spread out the ledgers. "Be it between patient fees, donations, and the council stipend, we're actually making money. Not a lot, but enough to hire properly." She was right. Somewhere along the way, the struggling clinic had become a successful practice. They hired Thomas Morrison, Beth's husband, who'd gotten tired of the general store and wanted to try something new. He turned out to have a talent for organization, for tracking supplies and managing budgets, and all the administrative tasks that Lena and Silas hated. "This frees us up," Silas said, reviewing Thomas's first month of work. "We can treat more people, train more staff, maybe even start thinking about opening satellite clinics in other towns." "Or we could slow down," Lena suggested. "Take a breath. Enjoy what we've built." Silas looked at her, surprised. "You want to slow down?" "I want to make sure we don't burn out, that we don't become so focused on helping everyone that we forget to take care of ourselves." She'd been thinking about this for weeks. "We've been running at full speed for 3 years. Maybe it's time to ease up a little, hire more doctors so we're not working 16-hour days. Actually, take time off occasionally." "You're right." Silas rubbed his face. "I'm getting old for this pace anyway." They hired 2 more doctors over the next year. Young physicians fresh from their training, eager to practice on the frontier. Lena trained them the way Silas had trained her, hands-on, practical, with emphasis on patient care over procedure. And slowly, carefully, she started to build a life that wasn't just work. She made friends, real friends, not just colleagues or former patients, women from the town who'd invite her to dinners, to gatherings, to the kind of normal social events she'd never experienced. She learned to relax in their company, to talk about things that weren't medical emergencies or refugee networks. She bought a house. Small, just 2 rooms, but hers. Not the clinic's, not Silas's. Hers. She furnished it slowly, carefully, choosing each piece deliberately. A table, chairs, a real bed with a good mattress, curtains for the windows, books for the shelves. She planted a garden and was terrible at it. Half her plants died, the other half grew twisted and strange. But she kept trying, learning from her mistakes, gradually getting better. You seem different, Silas observed one afternoon. They were having tea in her garden, watching her struggling tomato plants attempt to produce fruit. Different how? Lighter, like you finally put down something heavy. He sipped his tea. You smile more, laugh more. You're not constantly looking over your shoulder anymore. Lena thought about that. He was right. The hypervigilance had faded, slowly but surely. She still had bad days, still had moments where the past came crashing back. But they were moments now, not her entire existence. I'm happy, she said, surprised by the realization. Actually happy. When did that happen? Gradually, while you were busy living your life. Silas set down his cup. You've earned it, this happiness, this peace. After everything you've survived, you've earned the right to just be okay. The permission in those words hit harder than she expected. She'd spent so long fighting, surviving, helping others. The idea that she could just be okay, not fighting anything, not proving anything, just existing in contentment, felt almost revolutionary. 5 years after the trial, Lena got word that Marcus Hale had died in prison. Natural causes, the letter said. Heart failure. She read the news sitting in her garden, surrounded by plants that were finally thriving, and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no grief, just a distant acknowledgement that a chapter had finally closed. You all right? Silas had brought dinner, a habit they'd developed over the years. Fine. Marcus died. How do you feel about that? Lena considered. Indifferent. He doesn't matter anymore. Hasn't for years. She folded the letter. Is that wrong? Shouldn't I feel something? You feel what you feel. There's no should about it. Silas started unpacking the food. He was a footnote in your story, Lena. A bad chapter that led to better ones. You don't have to waste energy caring about his ending. They ate dinner talking about other things. A difficult surgery they had scheduled. The new medical assistant showing promise. Whether the town council would approve funding for the children's ward they wanted to build. Normal things. Good things. A life that had nothing to do with Marcus Hale or the Hale Inn or any of it. Later that night, Lena burned the letter in her fireplace and watched the ashes rise up the chimney. Goodbye and good riddance to all of it. The children's ward was completed in year 6, a bright, cheerful space with painted walls and toys donated by the community. They treated accidents, childhood illnesses, the normal spectrum of pediatric care. But they also became a refuge for children escaping abusive situations, a place where young people could heal both physically and emotionally. Sarah ran the ward with fierce protective instinct. She'd never had children of her own, never wanted them after what she'd seen at the inn, but she poured all that maternal energy into caring for the young patients who came through. You're good at this, Lena told her, watching Sarah comfort a crying child. I'm making up for not being good at it when it mattered. Sarah's voice was quiet. Every kid I help now is me trying to balance the scales for not helping you. You've balanced them, multiple times over. Lena touched her shoulder gently. You can stop punishing yourself now. Can you? Stop punishing yourself for things that weren't your fault? The question hit home. Lena thought about all the ways she still carried guilt, for the people she couldn't save, for not fighting back sooner, for 100 small failures that weren't really failures at all. I'm working on it, she said finally, getting better at it every day. Year 7 brought a surprise visitor. Beth arrived with her daughter, Emma, age 6, bright and curious, and news. We're moving here, she announced. Thomas got offered a job with the territorial government, records keeper, good pay, stable work. And I thought, she looked around the clinic, I thought I could help. If you need someone. I'm not a doctor, but I can organize, manage, whatever you need. What about your shop? Sold it, made a profit too. Beth smiled. We're ready for something new. And Emma needs to grow up somewhere safe, somewhere that feels like what you've built here. They added Beth to the staff as patient coordinator. She had a gift for it, making people feel comfortable, explaining procedures, managing the flow of patients so nobody waited too long. The clinic ran smoother with her there. Emma became a fixture around the building, doing her lessons in the corner of the waiting room, helping Sarah in the children's ward, absorbing the atmosphere of care and healing. She announced at age 7 that she wanted to be a doctor when she grew up. Just like Dr. Lena, she said seriously, helping people. Watching that little girl, safe, healthy, full of dreams, Lena understood what they'd really built. Not just a clinic, Not just a refugee network, but a demonstration that other futures were possible, that cruelty didn't have to be the final word. Year 8 was when they finally formalized the refugee network. The Freedom Road, they called it, a coordinated system spanning 3 territories, involving dozens of doctors, merchants, rangers, and ordinary people who were just tired of watching their neighbors suffer. They held the first official meeting in the clinic's meeting hall. Representatives from 12 towns, all of them committed to helping people escape exploitation and abuse. They shared resources, strategies, legal expertise, figured out how to make the network sustainable instead of dependent on a few individuals burning themselves out. "This is what I wanted," Lena said to Silas after the meeting. "This is bigger than us now. It'll keep going even after we're gone." "Planning on going somewhere?" he teased. "No, but we're not young anymore. Eventually, someone else will need to carry this forward." She looked at the organizational chart they'd drawn up. "I want to make sure it's solid, that the foundation holds." They trained leaders in each town, set up funding mechanisms, created legal resources for people navigating contract disputes or filing abuse charges, built something that could survive beyond any individual. Year 9 brought Lena's first real vacation. A week away from the clinic, traveling to the Northern Territories with Silas just to see what was there. They visited the towns where their former refugees had settled, saw the lives people had built. Jacob's carpentry business employed 15 people. Margaret was teaching at a textile academy. Peter's farm was thriving, each one a success story, a life that almost didn't happen. "We did this," Silas said, standing in Jacob's workshop. "Not just saved them, enabled this." They did this," Lena corrected. "We just gave them the chance. They did the work of building actual lives." But she understood what he meant. Every piece of furniture Jacob made, every student Margaret taught, every crop Peter harvested, all of it was a ripple extending out from decisions they'd made years ago. Proof that one person helping another could change the world, even if only in small, quiet ways. Year 10 arrived with fanfare they didn't want and couldn't avoid. The Territorial Council declared it Crow Rourke Clinic Day, honoring a decade of service. There was a ceremony, speeches, a plaque. "I hate this," Lena muttered, standing on the platform while the mayor talked about their contributions to the community. "Smile and endure it," Silas whispered back. "It'll be over soon." But after the ceremony, when people came up to shake their hands and share stories about how the clinic had saved their child, their parent, themselves, Lena started to understand. This wasn't about her and Silas. It was about what ordinary people could build when they decided to care about each other. The celebration became an annual thing, a day when the community came together to remember why they'd built what they'd built, why they supported the clinic, the Freedom Road, the whole network of mutual aid. Year 12 was when Silas started talking about retirement. "Not immediately," he said quickly, seeing Lena's expression. "But soon. I'm 63, Lena. I'm tired. I want to spend my last good years doing something other than 16-hour shifts." "What would you do?" "Travel, read, sleep past dawn for once." He smiled. "Train the next generation. Write down everything I've learned so it doesn't die with me. Maybe just exist for a while without crisis." Lena understood. She was tired too, though at 38 she had more years ahead of her. But the idea of slowing down, of passing the torch to younger doctors while she focused on teaching and administration, that had appeal. "Let's do it," she said. "Not all at once, but gradually. Shift our roles, make space for the next wave." They spent the next 2 years training their successors. Young doctors who had the energy and idealism that Lena remembered from her own early years. People who believed medicine could change lives, who cared more about impact than income. By year 14, Silas was semi-retired. He came to the clinic 3 days a week, handled consultations, taught medical students. The rest of the time he traveled, visiting old friends, seeing the world he'd hidden from for so long. Lena cut back too, 4 days a week at the clinic, 3 days working with the Freedom Road Network. Actual days off where she gardened or read or just sat in her house enjoying the quiet. She was financially stable for the first time in her life. Not wealthy, but comfortable. She could pay her bills, buy what she needed, save a little. The constant anxiety about survival had finally loosened its grip. Year 15 brought a letter from the Territorial Medical Board. They wanted to award Lena their Distinguished Service Medal, recognizing her contributions to frontier medicine and refugee assistance. "You should accept it," Beth said when Lena showed her the letter. "You've earned it." "I don't need medals, I just wanted to help people." "Then accept it for all the girls who are still where you were, who need to see that someone like them can become someone like you." Beth's expression was serious. "Representation matters, Lena. Your story matters. Let them tell it." So Lena accepted the medal at the annual medical conference, gave a short speech about her journey from kitchen worker to doctor, from property to person. Talked about the people who'd helped her, Silas, Beth, Margaret, all the others who'd refused to let her disappear. The speech was supposed to be 15 minutes. She talked for 45. When she finished, the room erupted in applause that didn't stop until she left the stage. Afterward, people crowded around her, young doctors wanting advice, refugees wanting to share their own stories. One woman in particular caught her attention, thin, nervous, with old bruises still visible on her arms. "I'm stuck," the woman whispered. "I don't know how to get out, but hearing your story, maybe there's a way?" Lena gave her the contact information for the nearest Freedom Road station, made sure she knew she wasn't alone, watched her walk away with something that looked like hope. That was the real medal, not the chunk of metal on a ribbon, but the knowledge that her story could light paths for others. Year 17 was quiet. Good quiet. The kind where nothing dramatic happened because the systems they'd built were working. The clinic ran smoothly. The Freedom Road helped hundreds of people. The network expanded into new territories. Lena spent more time teaching than practicing medicine. She loved it, watching young doctors develop confidence, answering their questions, sharing hard-won knowledge. She was good at it in ways she hadn't been good at anything else. "You found your calling," Silas said, visiting for dinner one evening. "I thought medicine was my calling." "Medicine was your salvation. Teaching is your calling. There's a difference." He helped himself to more food. "You're building something that'll outlast all of us. Every doctor you train will train others. Every technique you teach will save lives for generations. That's legacy." Legacy. The word sat heavy and light at the same time. Lena had never thought about legacy. She'd been too busy surviving, then helping, then just living. But looking at it now, the clinic, the network, the hundreds of people they'd helped, it was substantial, real. She'd left a mark on the world. A good mark. Year 20 arrived with less fanfare than year 10. Just a small party at the clinic, current staff and old friends sharing stories and pie. Emma, now 15 and serious about medical school, gave a speech about how the clinic had shaped her life. "I grew up here," she said. "Watching Dr. Lena and Dr. Silas prove that caring about people wasn't weakness, that helping others made you stronger, not more vulnerable. They showed me that the world could be better if enough people decided to make it so." Lena cried. Not sad tears, just overwhelmed tears, at the unexpected honor of having influenced this young woman's life, at the chain reaction of goodness spreading out from one decision to help one person on a mountain 20 years ago. Silas was 73 now, mostly retired. He'd moved into a small cottage on the edge of town where he spent his days reading and writing his medical memoirs. He looked peaceful, content, like a man who'd completed his life's work and was satisfied with the results. "Any regrets?" Lena asked him one afternoon, visiting with tea and biscuits. "Hundreds, but none of them are about the big things." He shifted in his chair, joints creaking. "I regret being harsh sometimes when patients would have been better. I regret patients I lost because I didn't know enough. I regret years I spent hiding when I could have been helping." He paused. "But I don't regret the mountain. Don't regret saving you or the others or building what we built. Those are the things that mattered." "What do you think happens to it after we're gone?" "It keeps going, or it doesn't. We can't control that." He sipped his tea. "We did our part. Built something good. Trained people to maintain it. What comes next isn't our responsibility." The wisdom in that settled over Lena like a blanket. She'd spent so many years trying to control outcomes, to ensure people were safe, to prevent every possible disaster. But Silas was right. At some point, you had to trust that the seeds you'd planted would grow on their own. She was 48 now. Not young, but not old either. Healthy, active, with potentially decades ahead of her. What did she want to do with that time? The answer came gradually. She wanted to write, to document not just medical procedures, but the human stories behind them, to preserve the memories of everyone who'd passed through the clinic, everyone who'd found freedom through the network. She started interviewing former refugees, recording their stories, their journeys, how they'd rebuilt their lives. Beth's story, Jacob's, Margaret's, Peter's, hundreds of others, each one a testament to resilience, to the human capacity for survival and growth. The book took 3 years to write. It wasn't fancy, just honest accounts of real people's real struggles. But when it was published, it became required reading for medical students across the territories. A reminder that patients were people, that healing was about more than just bodies. Silas died in year 23, peacefully, in his sleep, at age 76. He'd been reading before bed, the book still open on his chest when they found him the next morning. The funeral was enormous. People traveled from across the territories to pay respects. Former patients, former refugees, doctors he'd trained, people whose lives he'd saved or changed or simply touched. They filled the church, spilled out into the streets, a community united in grief and gratitude. Lena gave the eulogy, talked about a man who'd chosen compassion over bitterness, who'd transformed his exile into opportunity, who'd spent his life pulling drowning people to shore. Talked about what he'd meant to her personally, savior, teacher, partner, friend. He used to say that medicine was about reducing suffering, she said, her voice steady despite the tears. He spent 40 years doing exactly that. The world is smaller without him, but it's also better because he was in it. They buried him on a hill overlooking the town with a simple stone that read, Silas Rourke, Doctor, 1950 to 2026. He helped. After the funeral, Lena stood at his grave for a long time, remembering. The mountain cabin. The first time he'd treated her injuries. His patience as he taught her medicine. His quiet pride as she'd grown into a doctor herself. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. For seeing something in me when I couldn't see it myself. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a bird sang. Life continued, as it always did, even in the spaces left by loss. Lena returned to the clinic the next day. Work was the best tribute she could offer, continuing what they'd built, honoring his legacy through action rather than grief. Year 25 brought Emma to the clinic as a newly certified doctor, bright, capable, with her mother's organizational skills and Silas's medical intuition. She slipped into the practice like she'd always been there. I want to expand the Freedom Road, she said during a staff meeting, into territories we haven't reached yet. There are still people who don't know help exists. Watching her present plans, seeing the passion and competence, Lena felt a weight lift. The work would continue. The next generation was ready. She stepped back more. Let Emma take the lead on new initiatives. Focused her own energy on teaching, writing, mentoring. The clinic didn't need her to run it anymore. It needed her to preserve its history and values so future generations would understand why it existed. Year 28 was when Lena finally took a full retirement. Not because she was too old, she was only 56, but because she'd done what she set out to do. The clinic was thriving. The Freedom Road was expanding. Her book had inspired a whole generation of doctors to see medicine as social justice work. She moved to a small house near Silas's grave. Spent her days gardening, she'd finally figured it out, and writing a second book. This one about the practical aspects of building mutual aid networks, a how-to guide for communities wanting to help their vulnerable members. Former patients still visited. People she'd treated decades ago, now with grown children and grandchildren. They'd tell her how that surgery she'd performed had given them 20 extra years with their family, how her kindness had made them feel human again when the world had treated them as disposable. You changed my life, they'd say. And Lena would think about the girl she'd been 30 years ago, beaten and broken and sold for 50 silver. About how impossible it would have seemed then that she'd become someone who changed lives instead of just surviving them. The transformation hadn't been smooth, hadn't been easy. She still had scars, physical and emotional. Still had days where the past came back and she had to remind herself she was safe now. Still struggled with feeling like she deserved the good things she'd built. But she'd learned something important over those 30 years. You didn't have to be healed to help. Didn't have to be perfect to make a difference. You just had to care enough to try, to keep showing up, to believe that people were worth the effort. That was the real lesson. Not that suffering made you stronger, suffering just hurt, but that choosing to help others, choosing connection over isolation, choosing to build instead of destroy, that created strength. Year 30 arrived quietly. Lena was 58, healthy, content. She woke one morning in her little house, made tea, walked to the cemetery to visit Silas's grave. "It's been 30 years, she said aloud. 30 years since you opened that cabin door and let me in. Everything I am came from that moment. Everything good in my life traces back to your decision to help." The stone offered no response, but Lena felt the connection anyway, the invisible thread linking that mountain cabin to this moment. Silas had changed her trajectory completely, and she'd paid it forward, changing hundreds of other trajectories in turn. That was how it worked. Not grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though those happened too, but mostly just one person helping another, who helped another, who helped another. A chain of compassion extending through time and space, each link both receiving and giving. Lena walked back to her house through the town she'd helped build, past the clinic, still thriving under Emma's leadership, past the Freedom Road office, now a permanent institution, past people she knew, people she'd treated, people whose lives had intersected with hers in ways both big and small. She'd never been a hero, never been extraordinary, just an ordinary woman who'd survived something terrible and decided to make sure others didn't have to survive it alone. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. She reached her house, settled into her garden, picked up her pen. The second book was nearly finished. After that, maybe a third. Or maybe she'd just tend her tomatoes and enjoy the peace. Either way, she'd lived a life that mattered, had transformed suffering into service, trauma into teaching, pain into purpose. The girl who'd been beaten in a kitchen had become the woman who healed in a clinic. The property that had been sold for silver had become the person who freed others. The one who'd been told she was worthless had proven, through decades of quiet, consistent work, that every person had worth. That was her legacy. Not medals or monuments, but the simple, radical act of treating people like they deserved dignity. Of believing that everyone was worth saving, worth teaching, worth giving a second chance. Lena looked around her garden at the life she'd built from nothing and smiled. She was home. She was free. She was enough. And that, after everything, was the only ending she'd ever needed.